Hello, everybody, and welcome in to episode 1 of our podcast here, Orbit Football. Ladies and gentlemen, you're joining myself, Cade Williamson, and my co-host today, Tyler the Doc Stevens. We're going to be talking a little Week 0, giving a preseason update in our podcast today, talking some college football. We're excited to get into it, Doc. I know we've wanted to do this for a minute. We've been talking college football for a while. We're doing this right as Week 0 is starting, ladies and gentlemen. We got actually might be able to pick it up a little bit in our background. We've got Notre Dame and Navy over there in Ireland playing in our background right now. But we're gonna give some updates, give some rankings, insights on some of the teams, how we're thinking going into the season.
Yeah, super excited to get into this. This has been in the making for almost 2 years now.
Oh yeah.
We are sitting in a dorm room in Athens,
It's really
Ohio.
It's an apartment. It's an apartment. I'll say
yeah.
I've leveled up in the world.
Our Bobbies are playing later tonight, so we are ready. We are
we're
ready to kick the football season off. Bobbies are gonna roll.
Yes,
But guess what? This college football season's going to roll. It should be a fantastic season to have.
And, we'll just jump right into it, get it real quick, talk little conferences. We're going to go Power 5. Mostly today we're going to talk as well about Notre Dame in there, see what we got for them. A couple Group of 5 teams we're going to hit on, then finish up with some more Power 5 there. Obviously going top to bottom with some of those Power 5 conferences. We're going to wrap it up with some of our teams that we have in the top 25. Preseason top 25, and that'll really wrap up this opening episode of this podcast. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it and let's talk about some conferences. Doc, which one you want to talk about first out of the Power 5?
Let's start with the big boys. Let's go to the Southeastern Conference, the
Okay.
SEC. What many people assume to be the best, and the championships do show that they have been the best over the past, 20 years or so.
I really think you could go 25 since
Right.
2000. You could really go back then and look at how good the SEC's been. I mean, when you look at it back, I think the what I'd seen is that little circle that people have in that area where it's just almost that Gulf area where you got LSU, you got Louisiana where you got LSU, you've got Alabama, you've got Auburn and Alabama, you've got a little bit of Florida where you've got, Florida State, and granted they're not SEC, but still, reputable in that area, as well as Florida down there in Gainesville, Georgia from Athens, and then I think the circle also included Clemson there, but it's been popped up a lot on Twitter, a lot of the social media pages. I know you know what I'm talking about, but, SEC obviously is going to be, I mean, it's the best conference in college football. It's going to be the best conference in college football, and when you look at recently, it's been Georgia's conference. It's been the Bulldogs recently who've stepped up there in that conference, back-to-back national champions. They proved last year that they can lose a lot of NFL talent, especially on that defense, and just replace it and be just as good and win a national championship. They were the top dogs last year, no pun intended. And then when you looked at the West, it was LSU. LSU had a solid year. Alabama had a bit of a down year. Part of that due to, they lost that game to Tennessee. Tennessee had an up year last year with Hendon Hooker. Ole Miss started off strong and then struggled late. They were a team. Texas A&M was high on a lot of people's radars and just fell off throughout the season. South Carolina picked it up a little late in the season. What team do you really want to hit on? We want to go top to bottom here and talk about our predictions of what these teams and their records are going to be?
I mean, first, the first team I want to talk about is Alabama, because when you talk about Alabama football, it's championships on championships. But when's the last time Alabama had to make 2 coaching hires that could, it really does matter, because they are behind Georgia as of right now, and maybe Alabama, the dynasty, they have created a dynasty clearly, but Georgia's right there, and they're they get 1 or 2 more, and who knows how far they're going to roll.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's going to be a big year. Tommy Rees coming over from Notre Dame. How is that offense going to look? Is he going to be able to develop a quarterback? Because, Jalen Milroe, I believe, is going to be starting week 1.
They still have not announced it, and we're recording this the Saturday before week 1, and they have not announced. But it does seem like they're going to go with Milroe over Buckner. But Buckner had that connection. Tommy Rees, obviously, at Notre Dame last year. Granted, he was hurt for a majority of that season at Notre Dame last year, but it's still going to be a controversy for them. And
can't forget about Ty Simpson either.
That is true. Yeah, Ty Simpson's in that conversation as well. But the other thing about that is that it's not just Alabama that's one of those top dogs this year that's having some of those quarterback battles. We'll get to that, when we move on to other power conferences and even Georgia. But Alabama, from what I see, is that last year they had a lot of young talent around Bryce Young. And Bryce Young, obviously, the first overall pick in the draft, one of the, best prospects in recent history when you look at it for quarterback prospects, especially coming out of the SEC, which has the most talent out of anywhere when you look all across college football. But the other thing that I have a question about that Alabama team is, you talked about, Tommy Rees coming in and implementing a new system, but it's also those other skill positions. They've recruited that talent, and that talent is good, but that nobody's really stood out. I mean, when you look at those receivers, Prentice was okay, but it wasn't the great. I'm trying to think of some of the others off the top of my head here that were names that were they put up numbers, but they weren't exactly the best players for the Alabama Crimson Tide. They're gonna have that talent. They're gonna have that 5-star talent. They did lose Cameron Latu to the draft, though, and he was a very solid pass-catching tight end for them. They lost Jahmyr Gibbs, not to mention Bryce Young, and that's what makes me a little, I don't want to say concerned about this Alabama team, because they're gonna be good. It's Bama. They're gonna be good. It's just, how good is Bama gonna be? Is it gonna be a repeat of last year, or is it going to be those mid-2010s Bama teams? I don't think we're going to see a 2020 Bama-style team this year, but I think we could get, one of those, like, 2015 Bama teams,
the old school Alabama
correct,
teams,
where it's very built on that defense, and you've got a couple pieces on offense that just have breakout years.
Yeah, and going back to the offense, Ja'Cory Brooks is a guy that's going to really have to step up, and another one, Jermaine Burton. He won the national championship against Alabama at Georgia, and a month or two later, he transferred from Georgia to Alabama, and Ja'Cory Brooks, Kobe Prentice is going to have to. When he did play, he was well, but he was not on the field too much. So we'll see if he can get on the field. And I know Saban had a few things to say about Kobe Prentice, just within practice, and just it seems like the ball was not rolling with him in Nick Saban's mind. So going to this defense, this defense could be extremely good. The secondary is what I'm really going to be looking towards, and also they have a new defensive coordinator coming over. Pete Golding was he was good, but the adjustments did not seem to really come in, and that's kind of what led to their downfall. And Kevin Steele is going to be coming in. This will be a huge task for him, obviously, because Alabama defensive coordinator, you're going to be expected to blank opponents, shut down an entire offense. And the last few years they've really gotten away from that. When's the last time you were really seeing Alabama win 45-30 and high scoring games like that? They want to get back, and
they want to get back to those like 24
they want to get
like 14.
They want to get back to those games where they will beat you down and you will have no answer for it.
Correct, and I think we're going to see that a lot from this Bama team this year. As mentioned, question marks, but there's question marks around a lot of those top teams. Bama's big question mark, though, are some of those games. They got a big one. They got a big one week 2 where they're hosting Texas. Last year it was at Texas. That ball game was very interesting. When you looked at it, there was obviously that very controversial call with Bryce Young in the end zone and the no safety and the intentional grounding or the fumble or whatever they ended up actually ruling it as. But there was a lot of controversy around that. Alabama did pull out that game, but that's an interesting game to highlight early on in the season with a team that's not exactly set in stone, at least offensively, or with who's going to step up and be big in those games and grind out possibly that game against Texas.
And that game against Texas last year, a very undisciplined Alabama team, and you just do not see that often. So going back to these old-style roots that they are going to try to implement, are we going to see a complete Alabama team? They are not going to give you anything. You will have to earn every single thing, or is it maybe just a personnel issue within the players? And are we going to have to see Alabama grow up during a season, or will they get back to old ways?
That is true, and not to mention what the gauntlet of the SEC schedule is going to be. The SEC West, once again, is just going to be a slaughter, obviously, for Alabama. It always is. And Another one that's got a big highlight for me, at least on their schedule, somewhat in the middle of the season, is a place where they've had trouble in recent memory, and that's Kyle Field. Traveling out to face the Aggies of A&M, obviously 2 years ago. The big one, they lost on that walk-off field goal. I mean, Alabama's had trouble with Texas A&M, even when Texas A&M might not be at their power, at their best power. Even last year, to look at it, Texas A&M finished 5-7, and Alabama at home still somewhat struggled with Texas A&M and putting that ball game away. And that's a big game that I've got highlighted because obviously Kyle Field is not a fun place to play as an away team. So when you're looking at Alabama and you're looking at that team and you're looking at that, you get through Texas, you get to that middle of the season. What are some of those struggles that they might face moving forward, as well as some of those other games to highlight down the stretch for them?
I don't know. That game at Kyle Field is going to be it'll be an interesting one. It'll be the first time they are back at A&M since the loss. First loss to a graduate under. It was graduate under Saban. That's his
right.
First,
that is correct.
His first loss, and man, I think Saban. They did win last year, but I think they really wanted to blow the brakes off of A&M, and they just did not do that last year. So we're gonna see if A&M can come back with Bobby Petrino at the offensive coordinator role. It's just man, that game is gonna be it's gonna be a fun one to watch. That's for sure.
And now, obviously, to the latter stage of the season for Alabama, obviously the LSU game. Last year, LSU took it down to the wire. That ball game, they went for two, and they ended up. I mean, when you look at Brian Kelly said, "Well, here's the way we got to beat Bama. We got to beat them. We got to beat them on the 2-point conversion because you can't let that game continue. Because when you have a shot to beat Bama, you got to take it. If you fall short, you fall short. But you had to be aggressive in that moment, and LSU got that victory and ended up winning the SEC West in that ball game. What possibly that game might go different this year in Bryant-Denny when you look at those two teams in LSU and Bama late in the season in November?
One other thing, they were undisciplined. They were giving LSU a lot in that game, and when you go down to Baton Rouge, it's already hard enough, and if you're gonna help them out, it's never gonna be easy. But this time you're back at Tuscaloosa, you're gonna have the fans behind you. Obviously, gonna be a great game between two SEC legendary programs.
Oh yeah,
and it's just discipline. They're gonna have to stay disciplined, and also they're gonna have to rush the passer. They did get to LSU. They did get to Jaden Daniels. It just wasn't in time.
Yeah,
and obviously losing Will Anderson is not gonna help you getting
Correct.
pressure. You're losing potentially the best offensive and defensive player in college football, and yet we still have Alabama regarded so highly. It just shows why they are in the spot they are in. But if they do not fix some things from last year and the last few years, really, we could see Alabama start to not drop off, but we're not going to give them that benefit of the doubt that they've gotten for so long.
And another game that's a little interesting after that LSU game, or around that time of that LSU game, can't exactly remember on the schedule, but it's Ole Miss. And Ole Miss, I want to just for a moment just highlight on that, just because of last year's ball game. And that game was close too. Quinshon Judkins obviously carried that Ole Miss squad. He's going to carry it again this year. One of the most versatile running backs in college football, and we'll get to that when we highlight a little bit of them a little bit later. But Alabama, that game's in Bryant-Denny this year because it was at Ole Miss. It was at Vaught-Hemingway last year. So that game, I think Bama will have a bit more success this year, depending on how they play, just because it's going to be in a home environment. I believe they were coming off the LSU loss when they took on Ole Miss last year?
I believe so.
Yes, it was. So, you might not be coming off of a situation where it's a loss. You got to bounce back real quick, but you're facing another very solid and reputable program. So, Bama's Bama. At the end of the day, Bama's Bama.
Right.
We're as you
Always
said,
will be.
We're giving them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt right now because we know what Nick Saban can do. We know what that program is built on.
You don't want to see a mad Nick Saban. That's
Exactly.
all I know.
Exactly. And we'll see how mad Nick Saban comes out this year and how the Bama faithful will be this year after the Crimson Tide will take the field next week for week 1. And then they got Texas week 2. Big one at that. So that's a little bit of diving into Bama. But let's talk about the new really top dog in college football, and that's the
Go
Georgia
Dogs.
Bulldogs. They're the Georgia Bulldogs, back-to-back national champions. They've been on the come-up for a while. We saw it with that 2018 squad where it looked like they had the national championship wrapped up, and then Alabama, second to 26, obviously, came back, won that 2018. They were still competitive in 19, had a little bit of a down year in 20, came back in 2021 and just absolutely lit the college football world on fire, and it was because of that defense.
Yep.
Kirby Smart, I personally think, I know you might be a little bit different, but I think it's at the point. I think he's the best coach in college football. I understand that Nick Saban's still there.
I agree.
But I think currently Kirby Smart is the best coach in college football, and that's not a knock against Nick Saban, not one bit. Nick Saban's still, up there with Kirby. It's just Kirby Smart is doing exactly what Nick Saban did when he started
Just
with
at a
Bama.
modern version.
Exactly.
A more modern version
Exactly.
of Nick Saban.
And the other thing with Georgia is that they went and won back-to-back national championships. I mean, in 21, people just might forget that they had a quarterback battle for a majority of that, at least going into that season. They sort of figured it was going to be Stetson, but there were still questions around JT Daniels. Is he going to get some playing time?
A lot of people thought JT Daniels should have been
Correct.
the starter. There was a lot of criticism of Stetson Bennett, and myself included. I thought JT Daniels should have been the starter. But obviously Kirby knew what he was doing, because when Stetson got that job, it was never a question.
And he led him to back-to-back national championships, but he's obviously gone now for Georgia, and so have been a lot of their defensive pieces last year. But we hinted on a little bit earlier that Georgia did lose a lot of their pieces from the 2021 team defensively, and they just got right back on it with the 2022 team defensively. I think they're going to be there once again. I think they're going to be one of the best, if not the best, defense in college football this year, just because of who Kirby Smart is and how he likes to build his teams. But the question for me, I don't really have a question on it. It's more of an uncertainty. It's because of the offense, is that Carson Beck has been, obviously, he's getting the starting job this year. He's been announced as that he's going to get the starting job this year for Georgia. But they are returning a lot of their skill position players offensively. Obviously, Brock Bowers, the Mackey Award winner last year for the best tight end in college football, is going to be back and likely the top, tight end prospect in the upcoming draft in 2024. But they also got Ladd McConkey comes back as a wide receiver threat. They've got Cook back in the running game again this year. He's obviously going to be a threat for them. I can't think of some of their wide receivers off the top of my head that'll be back other than McConkey, but they're gonna have skill position players back. It's just what's Carson Beck gonna do at quarterback? But after seeing what Stetson Bennett can do at quarterback, I mean, you just have to be a game manager for that squad.
You also got to think they do lose Todd Monken to the Baltimore Ravens, so how is a Mike Bobo Georgia-led offense going to work? We've seen Mike Bobo at other places, and it has not been great. And I do kind of question that hire as Kirby Smart, but obviously Kirby has made me look wrong before, and if that happens again, I wouldn't be shocked. So, but yeah, this offense it's going to be night and day from last year. It's going to be something completely new that we really have not seen, and it's really going to fall on Carson Beck's hands. But if say Carson Beck doesn't hand out, you got Brock Vandagriff sitting in the wings, 5-star.
Correct.
You have talent behind Carson Beck, so it's going to be more of a thing of, if Carson Beck does not work, when do they go away from it, and who do they go to?
Correct.
Because it's going to be Carson Beck may be named the starter, but we're going to see multiple quarterbacks, I'm assuming, at the start of the year. Just it's practice is completely different from game action. It just is. So this Georgia offensive line is something I'm looking at too. The last 2 years, they have been able to impose their will on anyone who steps in front of them, and they have lost some pieces on that offensive line. And I'm not expecting anything about that offensive line to change, just because of who they have, recruited and brought in, and just with that defense too. I mean, it's just next man up mentality at Georgia, and it has been under Kirby Smart. Defense has always been Kirby Smart's priority at Georgia. if they're winning games 24-17, they don't care. It's a win.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter who it is. That Missouri game, they let up more points, than they probably wanted to. But in that second half, that is how they came back because their defense finally was shutting down Missouri. And, that could be another game to look out for this year. It will be in Athens. But, Georgia this year, they have questions, and they're going to get the benefit of the doubt just because of how good they have been and who have they brought in. But, nothing in college football is guaranteed, and it never will be. So, but I mean, Georgia, I'm just expecting them to keep on pushing.
Yeah, and I think they will too. I want to give a little correction. I don't know why I was thinking that James Cook, who was the running back for the Bills last year, was still involved with.
No, he was not.
Yeah, correct. But another guy that I actually want to hit on, who had a very big, I want to say Peach Bowl, was Arian Smith. Smith had a very well game in that ball game for the Georgia Bulldogs at wide receiver. He's a guy that could also step up this year for the Bulldogs going forward and looking at them. But now touching on their schedule, the theme around this Bulldogs schedule this year is that it's a cakewalk for them. When you look at it, most of their tough SEC East games are home, and really when you look at their cross SEC matchups this year, they're at Auburn for that rivalry matchup. They are also home against Ole Miss, and that is their only two cross SEC matchups this year for the Georgia Bulldogs. So when you look at that schedule there for Georgia, and you look at it further, now granted they do have a big one in late November. They're at Tennessee, but we'll get to them eventually. They handled Tennessee last year, and they handled them at home, and Tennessee obviously lost a lot of that talent offensively from that squad last year. But I'm just going to ask you this straight up. Are we seeing a 12-0 Georgia squad heading into the SEC championship this year?
Honestly, I don't know if it matters who they play. I think even if, Alabama was in this schedule, most people would still have them 12-0 just because they are that good. And especially with how I'm not going to say weak because we obviously do not know how the schedule will play out. Maybe, at the end of the year, Georgia Tech is a great football team. Maybe Tennessee, they're better from last year. Who knows? We can only project so much, but just looking at this schedule from a preseason view, on August 26th, 2022 or 2023, excuse me. Auburn is a big game. Maybe if the South Carolina game was on the road, their first big conference test, it would be something to look at. But having home field advantage for that is going to be huge. So, I think I would assume they would be 12-0 heading into the SEC championship game. But you never know.
Yeah, you do never know, and that's the nature of college football. But
who thought Mizzou was even going to be? They were leading at halftime, and they led most of that game. So you never know.
You never know. But we talked about the SEC championship game, so let's talk about the other team in that SEC championship game last year that Georgia defeated to go into the college football playoff undefeated at 13-0, and that was the LSU Tigers. LSU last year was very, very interesting team because they played that opening game against Florida State, and they lost that game against Florida State on a very interesting way as Jaden Daniels had a touchdown with 1 second left. They scored that touchdown, clock expired, and then they went to kick the extra point and missed the extra point. They lost that game against Florida State, but they bounced back. They had a good year. Now I will say they did get blanked by Tennessee at home, as Tennessee just ran into Death Valley and took care of the Tigers.
That was a red-hot Tennessee team, too.
Exactly. It was a red-hot Tennessee team at the time. But when you look also to that season, they had that win against Bama at home, which was a big win, and they went into bowl season in a very positive spot, granted losing the SEC championship game, but LSU returns a lot of talent this year, and that's the big thing that I key on about this Tigers team when I've been talking to folks around the college football landscape is that LSU, when I look at out of teams that I know and teams that don't have a lot of question marks around them, I think they're up there as one of the top teams that I know is just going to be competitive again this year, barring just an LSU-style collapse moving forward into the season.
And if you look at LSU's schedule a lot last year, they played a lot of close games, and they could win or lose both of them. The Florida State game, a 1-point loss. Auburn, they go on the road to Jordan Hare, win by 4. They get 40-13 lost to Tennessee the very next week at home. A 10-point game with Florida, which they were in control of, but Florida, I mean, they never won away. Then they dominate an Ole Miss team that I believe was ranked at that time.
Yes, they were.
Then the next week they come in to Baton Rouge and beat Alabama, and then the very next week after the Alabama win, they go to Arkansas, who was badly banged up. They were not in a state to play, winning football, and they escape with a 13-10 win. So and then 2 weeks later, A&M lost. So
exactly,
this team was kind of all over the place last year, but this year, like you said, they're bringing a lot of guys back, and that defense is just going to get better from last year, and maybe they need it because Georgia did hang 50 on them in that SEC championship game. But man, when you have a talent like Harold Perkins, it seems like you could do anything on a football field. And this LSU team is going to be a dangerous team. They returned Jaden Daniels at quarterback, so I mean, this team they're set up for success for sure. And I don't think a lot of people had them even winning the West last year. I was higher on LSU than a lot of people, but I seen a lot of 7-win seasons for LSU and preseason predictions. I had them at around 9 wins, and they exceeded that. So I don't know. It's always a good time when LSU in any sport is great, and especially now with how the West is shaking up. I mean, this SEC West is going to be it's going to be a really fun battle to watch.
Oh, yeah. And one of the first battles that LSU will have to take, obviously, they're taking on Florida State on that Sunday evening.
In Orlando.
Correct. It's in Orlando. Now, it is a neutral site game, but last year they played that game in the Superdome. It's practically a home game because LSU played the game last year in the Superdome, and then they switched it over to Orlando this year for Florida State. But another big game that they have is at the end of September. They take on Ole Miss. And Ole Miss, as you said, they blanked them. They didn't blank them last year, but they took care of business against the Rebels last year, did LSU. Now, this time they got to go on the road. They got to go to Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. They got to go play in that environment there. Ole Miss is still, once again, one of those teams that's going to be in that battle, at least at what we see at the beginning of the season in the SEC West. So that's a tough game early in the season. If LSU's not really in the right mindset, possibly after a Florida State loss, could that game go wrong for them?
And looking ahead to Ole Miss's schedule, they get Tulane. That is not an easy game.
Yes.
That's not a conference game, and it's on the road.
Correct.
So
it's in Yulman Stadium this year.
And then the week before that LSU game, Alabama on the road.
Yes.
So, we're talking about can LSU, if they do lose to Florida State, can they bounce back? That
might not even be the biggest question heading into that. It might be can Ole Miss bounce back after a tough couple weeks?
And that's just how good the West is, because it doesn't matter who you play. You're going to have a tough battle. Just 2 weeks before, the 2 weeks before that Ole Miss game, you got to go on the road to Mississippi State. Who may not be the best West team, but emotions are high, and they're going to want to have a great season for Mike Leach. That's for sure. And 13-10 last year, LSU escapes Arkansas. They got Arkansas the next week, right before Ole Miss. So
correct.
Can they look ahead, or are they not fully prepared for an Arkansas team that should be somewhat healthy? And they're returning KJ Jefferson and a decent amount of talent from that team. And SEC West.
Yeah,
you can't say anything more. It's the best conference in college football.
And best division in college football as well.
Yes, division, but I mean, this schedule is. Just going down the LSU schedule, it is not an easy schedule.
They also have a cross-divisional game where they got to go on the road to Mizzou after that Ole Miss game. So, we're looking at late September, early October, LSU's already starting the gauntlet, and then they got to go through the gauntlet again whenever November comes around, because their first game is of November at Bama. They play Florida at home. You know that's a rivalry matchup between those two. Now, granted, they get that really SEC-style cakewalk game before rivalry week where they take on Georgia State.
Hey, respect Georgia State,
no,
man.
I'm not saying that. You know, I respect the Sun Belt. I'm a big Sun Belt truther. Don't worry. But then you have that
could be stiffer competition.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I'll go with that one. But then they have to go and take on Texas A&M to wrap up the season. This time at home in Baton Rouge, but. That's the biggest thing is that can LSU as a team, we know that the talent's there, we know that they have the talent there, but can they survive the gauntlet? And can really any team from the SEC West survive that gauntlet and not even be alive to go and win an SEC championship, but also to be alive and move further and possibly get themselves into the playoff? So that'll be interesting to note to move forward, and we talked about that one team that might be having a tough, really, schedule and week into that LSU game, and that's Ole Miss. The Rebels, another team from the SEC West, where we talked about them, just hinted them on in the LSU section for Ole Miss, is that Ole Miss has a very tough schedule to start off this year.
Yeah.
They have Mercer to open up their season, and then they're immediately on the road at Tulane. And Tulane, I mean, they were a team last year. Obviously won the American, obviously got the group of 5 bid for the New Year's Six Bowl.
And they put it on USC.
USC. There at the end, they got aggressive at the end, couple onside kicks, couple things bounced their way, and they took the victory over the Trojans with their, Heisman winning quarterback in Caleb Williams.
Right.
So, I mean, Tulane's not a bad opponent. You got to go take them on the road. Now, currently, Ole Miss is favored by 7.5. This is as we're recording today for that ball game in Week 2. And Week 2's got a lot of interesting matchups. That's definitely one of them. But we also talked about they got to go Bama on the road and LSU at home to end September. But they also have, Auburn on the road, which could be an interesting game. They do host Texas A&M this year, and they currently... granted, this is still preseason. They are currently favored by 1. But then they got to go travel to Georgia.
Right.
They got to take on the Bulldogs this year and win that ball game. And then they got to wrap it up at Mississippi State. And that's, we talked about LSU's gauntlet. Ole Miss's gauntlet might be even tougher this year in the SEC West. And they're another team that has a lot of decent talent coming back on that ball club. Obviously, Quinshon Judkins is coming back. Jackson Dart. Now, granted, I'm not sure if Jackson Dart will really get that starting job there, but I believe it's going to be him. But, there's a little bit more competition there for Jackson Dart and for that squad. But you got a run game. Your run game is going to be solid with Judkins. Can Ole Miss really do anything better than what they did last year, though, or are they going to be worse this year when you look at the record? Maybe not the talent, but the record-wise.
Well, if you looked at Ole Miss last year, it was the complete opposite. The first, I believe, 5 or 6 games were a cakewalk for them, and then that is when they got into the meat of the schedule. The meat of their schedule was at the beginning of the year. You go to Tulane, and then depending on how you feel against this next team, they do play Georgia Tech.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to hint on that one, too, that they do play Georgia Tech.
And then they go on the road to Bama, and then they get LSU at home. We could be seeing a 1-4 or a 2-3 Ole Miss heading into the middle of the season.
Yeah.
And that's not... You never want to be in that spot. And especially, when you still have Arkansas, Auburn, A&M, Georgia, and, you have the Egg Bowl.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario, we could see Ole Miss finish, 3-9, 4-8, just depending on how the season goes. And, we can only speculate so much, but it seems like Lane Kiffin he hasn't left, but he's put himself out for other jobs. Right. And, it's not a lot of question around Ole Miss, but,
it's
if one thing goes wrong is, can they turn it around? Because, we've seen time and time again that once something kind of starts to fall off, they kind of just roll with the punches.
Correct, because it happened at the tail end of last year,
right.
And they ended up falling off there at the end of that season. But a team that fell off throughout the entire season after having very high expectations last year, the Texas A&M Aggies. The Aggies last year were a 5-7 with I mean, they had A-Chain. He's gone now. They had a lot of questions at quarterback. They finally, at least it seems that they have that question answered. But obviously Jimbo Fisher, it's been very well documented that he's had some of the best recruiting classes over the past 3 years, bringing in a lot of talent in for the Aggies, but going 5-7 last year, very disappointing. Not even making a bowl there. We understand that the SEC West is very difficult to get through, but you're not even making a bowl there from Texas A&M. Yeah. So, do they bounce back this year? And how far could they bounce back this year? Or is it just going to be another disappointing season for the Aggies?
It depends on what your expectations are, I think. Connor Wegman is, I'm assuming, going to be the starter, and I think he's a fantastic quarterback. But, I think we're going to find out early because they have to go on the road to Miami and play them in week 2, September 9th. So that is going to be a huge test. And then 2 weeks later, they get Auburn at home. So, man, I think if they'll be better. I do think they'll be better. It seems like they've gotten some guys that weren't interested in playing football and, just getting that NIL money and getting the benefits of what comes with it. And, it seems like they've gotten some of those guys out. As respectful if I want to be, just Haynes King was not the answer at quarterback for the Aggies. And, Max Johnson, he was okay. But for a team with a lot of expectation, you probably need to do better there. And what better way to kick off your season with 5-star Connor Wegman, who did play well last year at the end of the year. So I do think they will be bowl eligible this year, but it also depends on how much better did they get with subtraction. Because if you have that kind of toxicity in a locker room and just not a good atmosphere in general, you'll get better. But also, Bobby Petrino is an addition, very polarizing figure in the college football landscape. So, but he has had success, a lot of success. Yeah. So, hopefully, I don't want to see any team do bad. I want to see teams prove me wrong. So, who knows? A&M, they could win double-digit games. Do I think that'll happen? No. But do I think they could hit 8 or 9 wins, if everything goes right? Absolutely.
And we're going to hit a little bit on that schedule now. You talked about the Auburn game. They're at home to open up SEC play in late September there, but immediately after they got to go and play in AT&T Stadium in a neutral site game against Arkansas. Right. Another very reputable program. And then immediately after that, they got to turn around and get Bama at home. And that's their big game.
And that'll be circled on a calendar for sure.
Yes, it will be. But even after that, talking about the gauntlet, they got to go at Tennessee. They got to go play at Neyland.
The middle of this season is just rough.
And then they got to play South Carolina at home, who is a team that, went 8-4 in the regular season last year in the SEC East and had a quietly good year.
A lot of momentum around that program.
Correct. A lot of momentum around that program and Shane Beamer. But even looking further down after that, at Ole Miss, then home against Mississippi State, then they get Abilene Christian, and then you got LSU on the road to cap out that season. And it's very similar to what we talked about with Ole Miss's schedule of how it's just so tough to try to get through it.
From September 23rd to November 11th, they have no easy wins at all. Every game will be close. And you got to think, if their depth isn't any bit of, SEC caliber, they might win, Auburn and Arkansas, but that is a rough 6-7 weeks.
Yeah, it definitely can be there for Texas A&M moving down the stretch of the season. It can be a very tough, as you said, 6-7 weeks, very similar to what we talked about with Ole Miss. But we'll continue with the SEC West here. We might as well just go top to bottom with it. Next, let's talk a little bit about Arkansas. Razorbacks. KJ Jefferson's back once again. Sam Pullman's back once again, and head coach for
Pittman.
Correction. Pittman's back for the Hogs, and they what did they finish? They went 7-5 in the regular season last year. Was it 6-6? I know it was around that range.
I believe
because they had a great bowl game. It was the Liberty Bowl against Kansas.
Yes.
It was that game was something to behold if you were a college football fan.
Oh man, there was quite a bit of excitement in my household watching that game. That 55-53 victory was man, that was something.
They open up the season this year, Arkansas. They once again do take on BYU as an out-of-conference game, this time at home for the Razorbacks. They do have, I will note, they have LSU on the road right after that on the 23rd of September. Immediately after that, they travel down to Cowboy Stadium to take on, or AT&T Stadium rather, to take on Texas A&M. Then they're at Ole Miss, so opening part of the season for Arkansas.
And to go back to last year, they finished 7-6.
That's what I thought. I thought it was 7-6 in that ball game. But, then you got at Ole Miss. They're at Bama. They play host to Mississippi State. They have to travel to Florida on the road in a cross matchup. They do host Auburn, and then they cap out the season at home against Missouri. Once again, a very tough schedule for the Razorbacks. But are we going to expect something very similar to last year with that ball club? I think, really, when you look at it, I think they'll be very similar to what that team would be.
Well, last year they were very, very banged up. I believe they were at one point down to their QB3. But looking at their schedule last year, they did finish with 7 wins, but they went 3-5 in conference play. So they're going to need to step it up in that department. I know that the Texas A&M loss was a very heartbreaking loss for them. It was 2 points, and I think that's kind of what kicked that kind of streak off. They did beat teams like BYU and Cincinnati. They did beat South Carolina, but yeah, conference play is going to have to be better. But with health hopefully being just not even, it wasn't even bad. It was worse than bad. So hopefully, I remember 2 years ago when Arkansas was winning. It was fun.
It was
so
fun. Watching that team also, on that noon game against Georgia.
Yeah,
that was a really fun game to really get hyped for.
Right, but another thing with Arkansas, it seems like offensive coordinator has been the name of the game for the SEC. Dan Enos from, I believe, Maryland is coming over to replace Kendall Briles. So what is that going to look like? And, how does that affect, because I liked Kendall Briles, but last year it seemed like he was just dealt a really bad hand. But I don't know, maybe Dan Enos can come in, help that offense a little bit. I know he has relationships with Pittman, so there's already a chemistry there. So how is that going to look like on the field?
And we will, have to wait and see what the Razorbacks can do this year. We'll continue down the list of the SEC West squads. The next one, obviously, very heartbreaking for this squad, Mississippi State, the Bulldogs. I mean, we lost one of the greatest offensive minds, period, in college football, unfortunately, right before their bowl game last year, and Mike Leach for Mississippi State. But, They played very riled up in that bowl game. They got that victory in that bowl game.
It's great to see.
Yeah, it was great to see. And they're going to try to carry some of that momentum. Rogers once again back manning the ship for Mississippi State. Are they, what are we going to expect from the Bulldogs? Anything different or a very similar season for them as well?
Well, we'll know once again in the first few weeks of the season. Arizona at home. Last year they did go to Arizona. I like Arizona. They had a great season last year. They upset, I believe, was it Oregon?
I think it might have been Oregon.
They upset
it seems
someone
like they always upset Oregon every other year.
Someone late in the year. I believe it was Oregon. No, it was UCLA, I believe.
Yes, I think actually now that you're saying that, I think you are right with that one.
And then right after that they get LSU at home. So it's with the SEC West, it doesn't get any easier because 2 weeks later they get Alabama, and the week before that they go on the road to South Carolina. So it's just like these SEC teams, they don't want it easy. They want to start the season off as hard as possible, and it's last year, I believe LSU won the West at, was it, what, 2 conference losses?
Correct, because it was to Tennessee and it was to Texas A&M, yes.
And we could see that again. I mean, if the West winner, comes out with 2 or 3 conference losses, don't be shocked, folks. This, just like the Pac-12, it's a cannibal conference. People are going to eat each other alive.
And the Big 12, too.
Right.
I mean, Big 12 is just like that, too.
College football this year is going to be all over the place. And, maybe not just like the 2007 season. We had a lot of names. But, I
mean, we were what?
With this year...
In 2007, back to that. I mean, everybody talks about that's the greatest season in college football history, but we were 1 win away from seeing West Virginia in a national championship game.
We were 1 win away from seeing Kansas.
Yes, and Missouri in a national championship game. Yeah,
maybe not to that kind of level of kind of every kind of school. Even UConn and USF were up front. No, we're not going to see that. But if we see during the playoff, like the final, 2 months of the season, if we see over 5 or 6 teams enter the playoffs and leave the playoffs, I mean, it's not going to be shocking because this season is going to be nuts, man.
Yeah, and to wrap up the SEC West talk here, the Auburn Tigers, they just hired Hugh Freeze as their new head coach.
Another polarizing figure in the college football landscape.
Yes, he is, and Auburn, very down season last year. They were the only SEC West team to not make a bowl game besides Texas A&M. Those were the only 2 teams that did not make a bowl game in the SEC West. But, Auburn, they just announced Peyton Thorne was going to be their starting quarterback. I know us being up here from Ohio.
Go Spartans.
I mean, we've seen our fair share of Peyton Thorne up there. But, I mean, is Auburn, can they make a little bit of an upset, make some noise, make their voice heard?
Although, I don't think Peyton Thorne is the most ideal quarterback to be starting. Hugh Freeze did bring him in from the transfer portal, and also, if Hugh Freeze has trust in a quarterback, I have trust in Hugh Freeze to make it work because Hugh Freeze is a brilliant mind in college football, in my opinion. So, they're replacing a few guys on the defensive line too. Derek Hall was, I believe, a 2nd-round pick in the NFL draft. But they had a very good portal class, and we've seen what the portal can do in recent history. I mean, TCU last year, they weren't even that high in the portal rankings, and they just went to a national championship. So anything is possible. I think Auburn is... It's more of a gut feeling that I have with Auburn more than a actual rationale that I have laid out. But I think this Auburn team is going to be able to make some waves.
So now we're just wrapped up the SEC West. Now back to the East. We already talked about Georgia very earlier on, talking about the SEC. Now to the team that I think really shocked a lot of college football last year, the Tennessee Volunteers. Obviously, Hendon Hooker.
They're back.
Yeah. I mean, Hendon Hooker, their wide receiving core with multiple, guys drafted into the NFL draft with Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt, the Biletnikoff winner. Tennessee, not to mention winning a bowl game, a New Year's Six bowl game over Clemson, a team who's been very high as a program in the last 10, 15 years in Clemson Tigers, but Tennessee had a very good year. Obviously, they lost a lot of that. Obviously, they have a new man at quarterback under center, that being Joe Milton, the Michigan transfer. Can Joe Milton lead this team back to what they did last year?
Well, if he can't, it's not like they don't have a backup option.
This
5-star Nico, that kid he's good. And for Joe Milton to beat him out in camp, that's a good sign.
Yes.
And in the Orange Bowl last year against Clemson, he looked good.
He did.
And, I believe Hyatt did not play in that game.
He did not.
So he did it without Hyatt, and then obviously Tillman did, I think he tore his ACL last year in the middle of the season. So he didn't do it with either of those guys. So, if that's the Tennessee that we can get, against Clemson last year, that looked like a good team.
I did.
Maybe not as explosive, but, when you have a quarterback that can throw 80 yards flat-footed,
Yeah.
I mean, anything can happen over the top, and, losing Alex Galesh is not going to be great, but, how much was that playbook influenced by Galesh, and, was it a hypo offense? Was it a Galesh offense? We'll find out, obviously. But this Tennessee team, man, they're odd to me. I think they are going to be good, but I think just Hendon Hooker, he was, a college football player for a long time.
Yeah.
Having a guy that can run fast like Jalen Hyatt, I mean, you get that guy in a straight line speed contest, and I don't know if, we're talking Tyreek Hill speed,
yes,
if not faster. So, Hyatt is on my Giants. I'm excited to see what he can do, man. This Tennessee team, though, is it's going to be fun to watch, that's for sure.
And another team that was pretty fun to watch at the tail end of that season last year, South Carolina Gamecocks. Spencer Rattler, obviously very well known that he had some struggles at Oklahoma, got replaced by Caleb Williams, who eventually went on to win the Heisman. Rattler ended up transferring to South Carolina, both of them now not with the Sooners, obviously, but South Carolina last year made some waves. They upset Tennessee at home, and then they went and upset Clemson on the road to ruin both of those teams' playoff hopes. Not to mention a very solid performance in a bowl game against Notre Dame. But, are we going to see anything more from that team this year?
I'm not for sure. They did lose a lot of talent through the portal, but just like the West, maybe not the same way, we are going to figure out in the first 3 weeks of the season. At home against North Carolina, open up the year. Drake May, that's going to be a good look at him. Obviously, first-round talent.
That's actually a neutral site game. That game's in Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte.
Oh, okay. My apologies.
It's the Duke Mayo Classic, actually, funny enough, for the
my
name
apologies.
For it.
And then they get Furman the next week, and then you go on the road and play at Georgia. So, man, it's I don't even know if we have to keep saying it. It's just the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season, you're going to figure out if a team is good or not. It's this SEC, man.
I know.
I know. I'm glad I'm not a fan of an SEC team because I don't know if my heart could take it, man.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you. I don't know if my heart could take it either for those squads. But now to a team that somewhat, this team's interesting. They lost Will Levis last year to the NFL draft, but they bring in Devin Leary as a transfer to come be their quarterback from NC State. And Leary, a very respectable quarterback of his own, and that is the Kentucky Wildcats. Kentucky, they were there. They were competitive last year, very similar to a bunch of these other SEC programs. But can Kentucky, just keep doing what I'm assuming they're going to probably keep doing what they're doing this year. They're going to be on that really train of about, somewhere between 7 and 9 wins. They're going to be a solid program. I don't think they're going to do anything out of the ordinary this year with the Wildcats, but I think they'll be solid. I think they'll be a team that is obviously going to make a bowl this year for Kentucky. But can they put themselves in front of Tennessee or South Carolina or even Mizzou to say, look, we're the second best team in the SEC East, and I think that's the really big question with this team.
I think so, and by all reports, their training camp has been fantastic. This is a Kentucky team that the last 3-4 years has really put themselves as contenders, and Kentucky they used to be at a team and you could look at them on the schedule and pin them in for a win. And the last five years, you just can't do that. And they had a pretty good portal class. Tanner Bowles from Alabama, 4-star. J.Q. Hardaway, a DB from Cincinnati. Devin Leary, as you said. Ray Davis from Vandy. Keyshawn Silver, defensive lineman from North Carolina. And then to round it out, Carnegie, the running back from NC State. I mean, they as I said, 2 running backs and an interior offensive line and a quarterback. I mean, they're going to run the ball and they're going to impose their will on you, and maybe not like Alabama, but in a different sort of way. They're gonna just out physical you, and they're gonna outplay you, and that comes with great coaching as well. So, I don't know. I like this Kentucky offense a lot, and they've been great defensively in the past few years. So, I think this Kentucky team, man, I think they could tag second in the East.
I think they could too. And now we'll look at three. I just want to wrap these all up together and wrap up some of really the talk about the teams of the SEC. And it's really the final 3 teams in the SEC East, and that's actually, we'll wrap it up together. Might as well. But Mizzou, Florida, and Vanderbilt. Mizzou, I know it's a team that you're very high on this year. You were very high on the Missouri Tigers. Florida, just going at a glance here, Florida obviously losing Anthony Richardson. Can that team possibly be in a situation to make a bowl again this year? Are they going to have a bit of a fall off this year? What's the state of the Gators down there in the swamp? And then Vanderbilt being Vanderbilt. It's not like they're a program that's as bad as it was 5 years ago or even 3 years ago. They're making some improvements, although their stadium is not. Well, they are, but not in time for the season. But what out of these 3 teams do you really want to highlight and hit on to possibly be a little bit better than what they were last year, or maybe even something a little bit takeaway and be worse when you possibly could look at Florida?
The biggest improvement that I find out of those 3 teams is Vandy. They have been a steadily rising program. Last year, they beat Kentucky, and it is not often that Vanderbilt gets an SEC win. And they made Kentucky look pretty bad, honestly. I believe Kentucky took the lead with under 2 minutes left or 3 minutes left, and Vandy went down and they made a game-winning drive. So, and their recruiting has been fantastic for Vanderbilt standards. I mean, they're in the 40s and 50s, and for an academic program, obviously their baseball program has been great, and their basketball program has had a few players, maybe not the team as in general, but a few players that have came in. I like Vanderbilt to maybe not bowl eligible, but 5-6 wins. Who knows? Vanderbilt, once again, they used to be a team you could look at and just schedule, you could pin a W just, for your squad. But, some of these lower end, like Florida, like Mizzou, I believe Mizzou is going to be a solid team in the East, but they got to put it all together before that happens. So, but yeah, I like Vanderbilt, man. I think they can improve, and I know James Franklin had them at, I think at 8 wins at one point. But man, I like this Vanderbilt team to maybe be bowl eligible.
So, there's Vanderbilt. I know you're high on Mizzou. And I want to get your thoughts on Mizzou and why you're so high on Mizzou, though. I'm not. So it's more of the off-field kind of stuff with Beamer. Like Beamer, it seems like a culture where kids are wanting to come in to play football, and I like that. Luther Burden last year and this year, I believe they got 2 5-stars, or at least 1 5-star, and I believe the number 1 prospect in 2026 has just committed to Mizzou within the last week or 2. So, I mean, if that's happening, you're going to get more transfer portal hype. Obviously, your on-field success should go up. It's more of a thing about putting it all together on the field, and obviously they might not, but I'm not saying their win-loss is going to improve heavily, but I think that the talent on field is going to produce better productivity, and whether that results in more wins and losses, we'll figure it out. But I think
Mizzou might only get one more win, but I feel like they will be a better team on the field.
So that really wraps up our in-depth discussion of the SEC. So now, very quickly, give me your rankings in the East of how you think they're going to finish.
I would go, I believe Georgia wins. I'm going to go Kentucky second, South Carolina 3, Tennessee 4. I know I kind of talked Tennessee up, but I want to see them put it together over a full year again. Okay, South Carolina 4, or no, Mizzou 5.
4.
Mizzou 5.
Okay, so Mizzou 5.
I'll go Vandy 6, Florida last.
Okay.
And I think that could just be because Florida,
there's just a lot of loss in that program.
There's a lot of loss, a lot of just negative momentum, and I like the Billy Napier hiring. I really did.
I do too.
But seeing the product on the field last year and it probably getting worse, that program might need some help here coming soon.
Yeah, and I'll turn it right back to me. I'll give you mine. I got Georgia. Georgia obviously a 1. My 2 is Tennessee. My 3 is South Carolina. My 4 is Kentucky. My 5 is Mizzou. My 6, I'm going to go Florida, and I'm going to go Vanderbilt at 7. So practically, just switching up some of those middle teams between us. But now to the gauntlet of what is the SEC
Oh, man.
West.
You could just get a number generator. And
you really could.
Just roll it.
You could. But I want to go with you first. What's your 1 to 7 SEC West looking like?
I think I'm just going to go LSU 1 again, and then Bama 2. Oh, man. This is the hard part, is getting all these just middle teams in. I'm going to go Auburn 3.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like Auburn, man.
Okay.
I'll go Ole Miss 4.
Okay.
No, I'll go A&M 4.
Okay.
Ole Miss 5. I'll go Arkansas 6 and Mississippi State last.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I don't know about the Auburn one, but
Man, I'm just.
You're making that call.
It's a gut feeling,
You're
man.
high on the
I could
Tigers.
look like an idiot, man.
Right. I mean, they do have who you freeze. They're trying to get right back to being the Auburn Tigers that we know that they can be. But me, I'm gonna agree with you. I think LSU is winning the West. I think Bama is finishing second. I initially thought that I was gonna have Ole Miss at 3.
That schedule, man.
But looking at that, I'm gonna switch it. I'm gonna have Texas A&M at 3.
Okay.
I'm going to have Ole Miss at 4, Arkansas at 5. Even these bottom 2 teams, I'm a little bit conflicted. I'm going to go Auburn 6. I'm going to go Mississippi State 7. That's what I'm going to do. But we both agree that we have Georgia and LSU in our SEC championship
And we
games.
both agree that Mississippi State will be the worst team in the West.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, I'll ask you this. How many losses does LSU have going into that SEC championship game?
Conference or total?
Total. Period.
2.
2 total losses. 1 in conference or 2 in conference?
I believe they lose to Florida State.
Okay.
And I believe they will lose to Alabama head-on-head. But I believe Alabama will probably lose twice in conference.
So you're going to make a call, let's just say, the A&M game for Bama?
I think A&M, and then I will just give the other one kind of randomly.
It could be Auburn.
It could
be Auburn at the Iron Bowl.
It could be Auburn. It could be Ole Miss.
It could be Ole Miss.
I just,
You see Bama
I don't
winning
think
2
they're
or
perfect
losing 2
enough to not go completely, just run through everyone else.
So you think that LSU's got 2 losses going into the championship?
I believe they're
game?
both 10-2, just 1 less conference loss.
Correct. Now, I'll make a switch here. I do think Bama loses 2 games. However, I think those 2 games that they lose, I have them at Texas A&M, and I have them at home to LSU. I think that they lose to LSU at home. LSU, I'm very high on this team. I said it earlier. I'm very high on this team. And personally, I think LSU I think that they get Florida State. I think that game is close again, but this time I think they get Florida State. And I think they have one conference loss, very similar to what we talked about with Bama. It's, maybe it's Ole Miss on the road, maybe it's Texas A&M again. I don't know. I just feel like maybe it's Arkansas. I don't know.
Just somewhere on the
I
edge
just
of
feel like
spot loss.
LSU's lose in a conference game. But now we got the SEC champ game where we both have LSU and Georgia. Who do you think's taking the SEC this year?
I mean, it would just be dumb to go against the back-to-back national champion. I guess Georgia did lose the SEC championship to Alabama before they beat them in the national championship, which, if they go 12-0 and they lose in the SEC championship, they're still going to end the playoff. That's just how it is.
Correct.
But, I mean, I'll have to see it to happen. Yeah. And if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. Yeah. That's just how it goes.
Well, you said, you might be dumb to pick against Georgia. Well, I'm going to be dumb and pick against Georgia. I'm very high on LSU, and I think LSU is going.
Hey, man.
I think they're going 12-1. I think they're winning the SEC this year.
Okay.
I like that team. I like that team.
If that happens, man, I'd love it.
I like that team. I really do.
LSU fans know how to party, man.
yes, they
and
do.
they would be,
they're ecstatic for that.
As an LSU baseball fan, it was great to watch them break through, and after the Paul years, it was good to see Jay Johnson and co get some rings. But man, LSU is a rising program everywhere. Women's basketball, their basketball program's getting better, and I mean their football program is taking the next step. So
yeah. Well, there's our SEC breakdown. We went really in depth with that one. Let's just kept it with the Big Power Conference. Let's go to the other Big Power Conference. Currently, Big Ten. The other Big Power Conference. They're making some power moves this year, and personally, I think SEC top to bottom has the most depth. I don't even know if the Big Ten has the second most depth when you look at it top to bottom. I think that even the Big 12 can be in that conversation. I think even the Pac-12 can be in that conversation. But the Big Ten has those heavy hitters and those three heavy hitters all being in the same. So let's just jump right into it and get right. Actually, no. Let's wait a little bit. Let's get into the Big Ten West.
You're gonna do that to me?
Okay, yes.
Nah, let's go West. Let's
go West because there's a lot of interesting stories about the West this year, and one of the biggest ones, Luke Fickell to Wisconsin.
Who saw that coming?
Exactly. I mean, I know when that happened, both myself and yourself kind of thought it was a lateral move, maybe even a possible step down move with UC. Building a lot of facilities, going to a playoff, and then he moves to, and then they were going to the Big 12. They were going to be a Power 5 school, and then Luke Fickell says, I'm gonna take my talents, and I'm gonna go to Madison. The biggest thing about this team, Tanner Mordecai. Right. I've been high on this kid ever since he transferred out of Oklahoma. Right. I've kept a close eye on him when he was at SMU, and he's been a very solid quarterback. I mean, Tanner Mordecai. He's not going to really.
The problem with SMU has not been offense.
Correct. And but he's with that squad this year. Luke Fickell, head coach, Wisconsin. Defense is going to be good. How good can that offense be with him and Allen in the backfield really leading the way for those Badgers?
Honestly, I don't know because this is a complete flip around. They weren't, pro-style offense like they used to be, but they just weren't very, they were a kind of just a basic spread offense. And now you're going what's going to be essentially an air raid program with a lot of option routes and, a lot of, the play goes on as it reads kind of thing. So it's a big difference, and obviously it's going to help the running game. And I'm never going to discount a Wisconsin offensive line because, I mean, if you're an NFL team, if you have a 7th-round pick and there's an offensive lineman from Wisconsin, Michigan, or Notre Dame, go ahead and take him, and you can bet on him to at least make the team. So I'm never going to doubt a Wisconsin offensive line, and Braylon Allen is an exceptional talent. I mean, a lot of people thought he was going to Michigan last year, and I mean, this offense is going to be it's going to be something to evaluate as the season goes on, because although there's not a lot of talent that's going to be, starting from that team, it's not going to be completely just, whitewashed. So I like Tanner Mordecai. I think he's a fantastic quarterback. I hope that offense is good, because if it is, then that you could be looking at a top 10 team in the country as soon as, Wisconsin, they flipped from what was basically not a dying program, but really a very just old timely ran program to what could be a really good West team that rejuvenates the Big Ten West.
Well, there's another team that's kind of, they're in some polls. They're ranked in a couple polls as it stands right now, but they're interesting. They are really interesting. That's the Hawkeyes. Got Cade McNamara.
Yep.
Granted, he's had some issues with injuries with his knee. Is he going to be good? But you know that defense is going to be. That defense is going to be good. It's Iowa. Iowa's going to have a good defense, but can they do anything that will be better than that putrid offense that they had last year with Spencer Petras?
Well, Cade McNamara, if he does, start from the week 1 game that he has, yeah, they can be better, but also it's just the way that offense is ran, it is it's very basic, and it's easy for defenses to accommodate for that, and all with it being basic, the talent really just isn't there. So I mean, I love Kirk Ferentz, but Brian Ferentz, you need to let's get some adjustments, and let's get some plays that are past 1990, because they just really aren't there.
Yeah.
And going back on the defense, I mean, that's an Iowa defense. It's going to be good, but I just don't see a lot of people talking about it. Losing a 3-year starter, well, at least the last 3 years, and a team captain, Riley Moss, is that's going to be huge, and he's been fantastic for him. I believe he led the interception count, I believe 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And obviously he's been fantastic, and the Denver Broncos seen that. So replacing him, not just as a defensive back, but also as a team captain and a leader, and a guy who really stands out for Iowa football, is going to be needed, because when you talk about Iowa football, there's just not a lot of guys that stand out.
Correct.
But it's a total team effort with Iowa.
Correct. And speaking of maybe some total team efforts, personally, I don't have any other team in the West that really excites me. Not even the Boilermakers, the returning West champions, Illinois, because they lost so much on that team last year with the Fighting Illini. Northwestern's in a mess right now.
Yeah, they are.
For multiple reasons. Minnesota just can't seem to get over the hump with PJ Fleck. It seems like they're right there. They're right there every single year, and they just can't ever get over the hump.
And this is the year that Minnesota, they're not losing a ton of talent, but they're losing a ton of impact.
Correct.
So it's because when it came to Minnesota, the impact was up front, but once it got past that first layer, it just seemed like an okay football team, but just another Big Ten West program. So Minnesota is going to be interesting to look out for, because they were a program that had a ton of momentum. They were game day for Penn State a few years ago, and they won that game, and I believe they were ranked like 8th or so in the playoff poll.
They were up there.
I don't know, man. The West is just in a spot. It's just a lot of programs that don't have a lot of just spending and total resources to use at their disposal. And that's going back to it. We were talking about Luke Fickell being a lateral move, and not for the fact that Wisconsin, just because they've been not Wisconsin that we've known for the past few years, but just the state of the art of the facilities and just the overall, funding of that program, it's not on par with really what a Big Ten program,
Should be.
winning program, I guess, should be. So that's more of my, not gripe, but I guess, the questioning of what that was. But obviously he's done a great job through the transfer portal. Just the West is kind of all over the place, and you're talking about Illinois, how they lost a lot of guys, and it's kind of just like Minnesota, they lost a lot of impact.
Correct.
Losing 3 defensive backs to the NFL draft, obviously, that was a reason why they were so good last year. Because
one of the best, if not the best, secondary in all of college football in Illinois.
It was the best secondary to me because they just, watching film on those guys, they were just flying all over the field. And obviously that's going to help your front 7 out too, when you have a secondary that's that good. And, they do get Luke Altmaier from Ole Miss, a transfer at quarterback. They lose Chase Brown to the Bengals in the draft. So, I don't know. With the West, the only program that is really kind of the same is Iowa.
Yeah.
Because we're going to go to, I guess, the third, kind of, not sleeping giant, but a third program that a lot of people think that could win the West is Nebraska.
Yeah, I was gonna say we got to hit on Nebraska. Sure. I mean, you've got, obviously, Scott Frost era is done, and it was a failed experiment. And it didn't seem like it was going to be a failed experiment with the Scott Frost era at Nebraska because, he's a Nebraska guy. He won a national championship there at quarterback for them. He led UCF to very many great seasons down there, turned that program really around from what it was, where it was really just kind of in the doldrums. It took them to the highest heights that they've ever had. Now they're a Power 5 program, likely because of that. Right. And it failed. And he's gone, and a lot of that team, it's interesting to see, but what's the answer for Nebraska? Is it coming? Is the new era finally here?
I hope so, because not just myself, but a lot of Nebraska fans have been they just.
They're one of the best. Team. They're one of the best fan bases in all of college football. What they've had the sellout consecutive record. They've got the record for most sellouts consecutively.
I believe it was 2019 when they had game day against Ohio State, and they showed out. And obviously that game was
practically
a blowout,
got blanked in that ball
game.
But
up until halftime, they were still going crazy, and even when they were down, I don't know. It's just for me, I don't really hate any team. If anything, those kind of programs that are gonna be like that, I want them to be good because although you'll see some outlandish stuff on social media, Twitter, Instagram, or whatever from those fan bases that are so crazy, man, they just love college football in Omaha.
Yes, they do, and Matt Rullier is finally here for the Cornhuskers, and he obviously took Baylor and built that program. Went to the NFL, didn't really have much success, but he's looking to do the same thing back for Nebraska, and that's really about as much in depth as you can go about the West. It's just it's
shown in recruiting.
It's interesting,
and game, and there's some serious buzz around Nebraska, but it's felt like this for the past
exactly. It felt like that
15 years,
the entire years under Scott Frost.
You got to see a breakthrough to happen, and I know last year I was high on Nebraska just because the year before,
correct,
they
lost
so many close games, and last year it just completely fell apart, and of course the guy that they hire, Mickey Joseph, gets. Not Mickey Joseph, but the assistant that they hired after
as the interim.
As the interim, yes, not assistant. But he has trouble with the law, and last year was not a bright year.
Just a rough year.
So,
rough year out there in Lincoln.
I don't know, man. It's gonna be fun to watch. I hope they're good, man, because the Big Ten West. I don't want to say it's got to step up, but when you're basically, you can pencil in whoever wins the East to win the Big Ten. I mean, that's just how it is. They have to be better in the West.
And speaking of, you can pencil in who's going to win the Big Ten. It comes from the East. Let's talk about the East.
Go ahead and scribble all over that.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone knows right now.
Yeah. Everything I see from any outlet, they switch it up each day. From one day,
I switch it up.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know what's going to happen.
I do too, because we'll just start from the top. I mean, I saw something the other day. It was on Twitter where it was Maryland fans, and they referred to Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan as the big three.
Right.
So here's a big three right here. It's Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. Personally, all three of these teams last year, I thought they were all top 5 programs last year. Personally, I did. I thought that Penn State was the 5th best team in the country.
Definitely top 10.
I thought that Penn State was in the top 5 last year. I thought that if I had to rank them last year, the top 5 programs in college football, top 5 teams in college football at their peaks, I had at number 1 I had Georgia. At number 2 I had Ohio State. At number 3 I had Michigan. At number 4 I had Alabama. And at number 5 I had Penn State. I thought that Penn State Nittany Lion team was very solid last year, but I've said this as a person from Big Ten territory and as a person that's from the state of where Sean Clifford is from. I've never believed in Sean Clifford. I never believed that Sean Clifford could win those big games, and really he didn't for Penn State. But now, still being from that state, they got a new man. They got a new man at quarterback. They got Drew Aller. And me and you, Doc, are very, very in tune with Drew Aller. Obviously, the Ohio kid, played at Medina, led them to a state championship, 5-star quarterback. A lot of people think maybe it's an unknown at quarterback this year, but I don't see it. I mean, Drew Aller's got the talent. He did see some time on the field last year,
and
but
he didn't look. I mean, obviously, he did not look the greatest. I mean, true freshman. And, he was playing in that Purdue game in the opening week of the season.
Correct.
And, I mean...
He played in that Michigan game, too, because of Sean Clifford injuries.
Right. I mean, it's just... Aller is a guy where I feel like he's just ready for those big games and big moments. And, no disrespect to Sean Clifford, because obviously he started there for, I believe, 4 seasons?
I think
3 or 4 seasons.
I knew he was there at least since his sophomore year.
But, I don't know, man. Drew Aller just seems like a guy where he's going to be, if he wins the Heisman this year, I wouldn't be shocked.
See, I don't know if I'm that high on Drew Aller. I think,
the thing win the East.
True, but when I look at Penn State and I look at this team, they're returning. They lost a couple pieces at wide receiver, but they got a great transfer that you and I are very familiar with, and Dante Cephas from Kent State, probably one of the more sought-after wide receiver transfers in the portal this year. They went and got him. He's going to be a guy that they're going to use, and also that backfield. I mean, that backfield is going to be insane this year.
Offensive line,
exactly, like maybe one of.
Got some big bullies.
Yeah,
on that line.
They do. But the big question,
underrated offensive line.
True, a very underrated offensive line. But a big question that I have for Penn State that I think is being glanced over a bit. They lost. Now, granted, they probably still they do still have a lot of talent in that secondary, but they lost a couple really big pieces in that secondary. Joey Porter Jr. is gone. Jair Brown is gone. I mean, that defense is going to be good. They've been good recently, but can they be good enough to cement themselves and be able to shut down that dominant offense of Ohio State, a team that's really eluded them in victory since 2016?
I mean, last year, we were together watching that Ohio State game, and honestly, their defense was not the problem that game. They just
correct.
They really could not convert on offense, and really over the past few years, maybe Ohio State has gotten into the 30s. But it's the offense is obviously fine, but the Penn State defensively has matched up with OSU very well in the past few seasons, and I don't know, man. For me, this is a little bit of foreshadowing. I think this is the time they finally turn that page and and can get past some of these big programs that they just have not been able to beat.
See, you're going to foreshadow that, and I'm going to foreshadow what I think about this Penn State team, and I'm going to say I think 2024 is their year. I'm big on that 2024 year for them. I really think that that's going to be their year. Now, granted, I understand that a lot of their offensive line this year is probably going to the draft. They're going to lose a lot of that, but I don't know. And, I like Penn State. I do. I, as you said, you keep switching to who you think's going which way and who's getting the East, and I keep switching to who's getting the East. But, we talked about Ohio State, so let's talk about the Buckeyes. Both you and I, being from the Columbus, Ohio area, around Central Ohio, very familiar with this Buckeye squad. Very familiar with Ryan Day and company. Very familiar with how much talent that this team brings in year after year. Practically up there with the Georgias and the Alabamas and all of the Joneses of the college football world, and recruiting the talent that they get. But the biggest question mark about this Buckeyes team is the quarterback position. Now, very much like, Alabama and Georgia, but this one, to me, stands out even more than those two because unlike it seems that Georgia and Bama, Ohio State is not making one man their quarterback.
Right.
They're going 2 QB system into the season, and that can create...
It's going to be very like the 2015 season with
Cardale and
Jones,
JT
who,
Barrett.
won the national championship, and JT, who kind of got them to that area. So, I don't know. It's going to be compelling to watch because they're going to have to know by Notre Dame, because you will not be able to run a 2-quarterback game against Notre Dame. That's too big of a profile game. It's on the road. So, whether it's McCord or Devin Brown, their first road game is going to be in South Bend, and that's going to be a rough
first
game.
True road test. They do open up
yes.
against Indiana on the road, but yes, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it's going to be something to watch. I follow a lot of Ohio State sources on Twitter, and I've seen people say, Brown looks better, but it feels like McCord is kind of being set up to be that first guy. So, whether that's true or not, I don't know. I feel, Brian Hartline did come out and said, we have a starting quarterback. We just don't know who it is yet. So that gives you their confidence on who they can roll out. They think they can roll out either of them, and they'll be fine. And obviously OSU is they've put the last 3 quarterbacks they've had into the NFL draft.
And not just the NFL draft, but the first round of the NFL draft.
Justin Fields going at 13, and Dwayne Haskins going at, I believe,
I think it was
17.
50. Was it 17?
It was middle of the first round.
I knew it was 15, 16 area.
And then C.J. Stroud, obviously, this year, going very, very high.
Yeah,
so
1 second.
I don't know, man. We're Ohio State fans, but we can see through the problems that this team is going to have, and a big problem is up front.
Correct. Yes.
Losing Paris Johnson and DeJuan Jones at both tackle spots.
And Luke Whippler at center, too.
Who's going to be, the center of the play. No pun intended, but that is where the play is starting. And, if you have a guy that is inexperienced, which is probably what's going to happen, and this offensive line is going to be inexperienced, but thank God we have Josh Fry at offensive line.
Correct.
He's a fantastic offensive line coach.
Yeah.
So
got him from UCLA a couple years
he used
ago.
To be, I believe, the assistant offensive coordinator or something like that, and the offensive line coach. And, I trust the progression, but also I've seen that we're kind of still flipping around line spots to see who's going to be where. So whether that's a good or a bad thing, we don't know. But once again, when you're playing a team like Notre Dame, you're going to figure out what your problems are and what your strengths are.
And I think one of the strengths, at least on the offense of Ohio State, the rest of their skill position players. Yep. They're returning a who's who of names besides the only...
there's 10 receivers that could really start across the country in this room.
Yeah. When you look at this squad, the really only piece that's a skill position player that's not C.J. Stroud is Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Yeah.
And he didn't even play. He really didn't play last year.
And he got hurt, and
it was week 1. It was the game against Notre Dame. It was really, I think it was the second drive. It might have been the first drive of the game, actually.
It was definitely within the first half.
And then he tried to come back against the Iowa and the Minnesota. Both you and I both picked up that we thought Jackson Smith-Njigba had torn his hamstring, and that ended up being the case, and he was out for the season for the Buckeyes. But, they've got the man who's likely going to be the best wide receiver in the country this year, Marvin Harrison Jr., possibly even better than his dad.
That's
saying a lot.
That
if you're better than your dad and your dad's a Hall of Famer like that, that's tough to do. But Marvin Harrison Jr., man, that kid's talented. But they also have Emeka Egbuka's coming back, who could possibly be a first-round talent. Julian Fleming was used a lot last year for them.
And although Fleming has not been fantastic on field, he was still, I believe, 11th in his class, a 5-star out of Pennsylvania.
Correct.
And going back to Marv, him and McCord were high school teammates.
Correct.
So that could be, if McCord does start, that gets said all the time, but it truly is a thing. You have all that time to build up a chemistry, and especially for McCord, against maybe a Notre Dame team, if he does start, it's always good to have someone that you can just throw a ball up to and you trust to come down and get it, because one, he's seen it plenty of times in high school, and it's just Marvin Harrison Jr. is just absurd. So, but yeah, this skill position group is, we have G. Scott going to tight end just because he could not find room to play at receiver, and he was a 4-star coming out of I believe Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So the offense, the skill position group is not going to be something to worry about. And although I believe the offensive line could have issues at start of the season, I believe as we get back, more into Big Ten play, they'll be fine.
So now to the biggest question on this Buckeyes team. We talked about quarterback might be the biggest question. We talked about offensive line might being the biggest question. But to me, really, really the biggest question on this team is the defense.
Yep.
Because that squad, the defensive squad for the Buckeyes, since 2019 has not been anywhere near what they were in 2019. And they've still produced NFL talent on that defense too. Since that 2019 squad that featured Damon Arnett, that featured Jeff Okudah, that featured Chase Young, that featured a solid linebacking core of Pete Warner and Tuff Borland. You looked at that team. That team's defense was amazing in 2019, but now you look at the modern, and it's not like they're not recruiting great players. When you look at
recruiting has dipped.
It has.
But it's more of a development issue.
Correct.
It doesn't seem like they're turning that page. And a guy that could help turn this page, JT Tuimoloau.
Yeah. Tuimoloau,
yeah, that kid is...
When we were watching that Penn State game last year, I've never seen a performance like that.
2 touchdowns and another turnover just by
himself. And that really won the game for Ohio State against Penn State. And Tuimoloau is going to be really what should lead, I'm thinking, a pretty solid front seven this year for the Buckeyes. I think it's going to be pretty solid. They still have Mike Hall comes back in the interior defensive line, but the big...
I believe he got hurt in practice the other day.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's interesting then, because Mike Hall had a pretty solid year in the interior.
I haven't seen anything else after that, but I believe I did see he went down the other day.
But, another thing about it is, us as local guys, we know about the man, the 5-star, Jack Sawyer.
Yes.
Jack Sawyer is...
You're about, 30 minutes away from him?
Correct. And you're about 10.
Yeah.
And Jack Sawyer, actually, I see him all the time. Actually, over the summer, I see him all the time out at Buckeye Lake in Central Ohio. I see him all the time. I see his parents. I see his family. He's a great guy, but, he's got to be that man this year that a lot of Ohio State fans have talked about, because they've had that talent that's been from Central Ohio. They've recruited that talent, and it hasn't stepped up. Case in point, Zach Harrison from Olentangy Orange being in Columbus.
And just last year, he finally took that step, but it took 4 seasons to finally get over that hump.
He did get over that hump, and that's why a lot of people have focused on Jack Sawyer this year, because he was very highly recruited like Tuimoloau, but unlike Tuimoloau, Sawyer's he's a bigger guy, he's a bigger built guy, but he's got that talent to do it, and a lot of what Ohio State had said and Jim Knowles had said defensively for that team of why he wasn't exactly in a best position last year is because they really used him in a Jack
Jack
position is what they used him in. But this year they're going to have him as a down defensive end, and
Which
I think that's going to do him wonders.
Very well.
I really do.
I don't think he's quick and agile enough to play that jack role, and also he's been a fantastic run stopper. Like he's been fantastic in the run game. It's just the pass game he's not getting there, and that's really what it is. Ohio State, they should be pretty solid at stopping the run. It's more of finding more than one pass rusher on the outside and then one pass rusher on the interior. As we're spoiled as pass rushers. I mean, the Bosa brothers. Haskell Garrett from the inside, even Tommy Togiai from the inside.
Yeah.
Draymond
Jones.
Mentioned
names,
there's been too many pass rushers at Ohio State, and now it seems like there's not enough pressure, and that's real. I think people talk about the secondary a lot, but I don't think people look at how this pass rush has been. Because oftentimes our pass rush comes from our linebacker spots.
Correct.
So it puts a lot of pressure on the secondary, and we've seen our secondary when we're getting pass rush, it's not nearly as bad as it sometimes can look to be, and a big guy talking about the secondary that is going to be able to make a huge impact, and what could be his sophomore year, but since he's reclassified, he's still, he technically is a sophomore, but, I mean,
he really
he's
is
19 years old.
He's really a freshman.
He's 19 years old. Sonny Styles will be starting at safety, it sounds like.
Well, it sounds like they're going to use him very similar to what they used.
He's going to be everywhere around the field. Yes.
Ronnie, that really rocket Ronnie Hickman position.
He's going to play some nickel cornerback. He's going to be in the box, in heavy sets. He's going to be at high safety, and sometimes he's going to be all around the field. And I mean, when you let that kid fly, he is super athletic. He is so fast. He hits hard. He's a special team, a really good special team guy. And that is a guy I think that could really step up, be even a captain. I think he could be a very good player for this Ohio State defense.
And we will have to see if he can step up in those positions. Another guy that's a little bit younger that could possibly step up is C.J. Hicks.
Yes.
He was a 5-star recruited linebacker for them, but the unfortunate thing about him is that Ohio State's linebacking core over the past...
That is probably the strongest part.
It really
is.
I mean, they're returning Tommy Eichenberg, who stepped up last year, had a very solid season. Steel Chambers comes back once again this year. Cody Simon on that in there as well, but... the linebacking core is very solid, and back to that, the pass rush has to possibly be a bit of an improving point. But the biggest thing that people talk about is obviously that secondary. You talked a little bit about Sonny Styles, but they return really most of it besides one cornerback position and the safety position that was home for Tanner McAllister last year. That is going to be filled by the Buckeyes. But the biggest thing that they did was they went out and they hit the portal with a guy that I've heard that has been absolutely fantastic in practice.
He was fantastic for Ole Miss as well last season, I believe, as a true freshman. Well, I don't know if he was a true freshman, but I believe he was a freshman last season.
I will check you on that here quickly.
But, yeah, I mean, it's just this defense is going to be the deciding factor of Ohio State does, because, I mean, in the Penn State and Michigan games, their offense obviously has not been, we're not putting up 50 points on Michigan or Penn State, but it's more of us just kind of getting bullied up front and not being able to push back, and that is what puts our offense behind, and it just puts so much pressure on the offense to really be that good.
And you were talking about Davidson Igbinison, who's going to be the transfer from Ole Miss. I mean, you're going to hear that name a lot this year.
Yes.
And he was, from what I can understand and see, he was a true freshman last year. But, he's going to step up a lot. I've heard that him and Marvin Harrison are going at it at practice. They're making each other better. And that Ohio State team, the biggest issue for them recently, it's been the Michigan Wolverines. It's really
Unfortunately,
been.
It has been.
It's been the Michigan Wolverines, and it's a new problem for the Buckeye faithful, and a lot of them have eyes on Ryan Day to be part of that issue, because it seems like in the past 2 years when they've taken on Michigan, Ohio State seems like they're more focused on a national championship than they are about beating Michigan. But the first thing you got to do to really get to that national championship is you got to take care of business in Ann Arbor or in Columbus against the Wolverines.
And going back to last year, it's kind of weird because, if a field goal goes differently, there was a reality where Ohio State could have beaten TCU for a national championship, beaten Georgia in the semifinal to win the Sugar Bowl, and really gotten spanked by Michigan in that second half and didn't even play for a Big Ten championship. So it's just like, I love that Ohio State is trying to win national championships, but in this state, losing to Michigan, especially, coming into this year, they're going to Ann Arbor again, and losing to Michigan 3 times in a row is that's
could
not
make
allowed.
the seat a little hot
Yeah.
underneath Ryan Day in Central Ohio. But, time will tell. Obviously, they've got a very interesting game when it comes to that end of September where they have to travel to South Bend and face a very solid Notre Dame squad.
I just feel like that game's not getting talked about a lot. Last year it was a huge game.
It was.
This year, it just, maybe not because it's not the first week of the season, but I just, that Notre Dame-Ohio State game, that, what happens if Notre Dame just beats the brakes off Ohio State?
Correct.
With physicality, Ohio State, other than Oregon.
I mean, Notre Dame is a very similar built team to Michigan.
Right.
They are.
Like I said earlier, you want an offensive lineman in the 7th round that you just want to take a flyer on. Notre Dame and Michigan those are your programs, and Notre Dame gave Ohio State fits last year, so that's gonna be hopefully a fantastic game to watch.
And we will have to see how that one plays out, and obviously the one in Ann Arbor, and obviously the one in Columbus against the Penn State Nittany Lions. But the final team that we really got to talk about the Big Ten East and the Big Boys is the two-time, back-to-back Big Ten champions, the Michigan Wolverines. And Michigan, they've done it, and they've done it with 2 different quarterbacks.
Yes.
And the one is gone, Cade McNamara, but the man of the hour up there in Ann Arbor is J.J. McCarthy.
Michigan legend.
He is a Michigan legend at this point. But now Michigan seems like their team, unlike Ohio State, where it seems like Ohio State is building to win a national championship, this Michigan's team seems like it's building to beat Ohio State, but then can't perform after that because they've built themselves to just beat one team.
Right.
What is going to be the answer for them to really get to that next step this year and get them really to be respected on a national stage and beating the Georgias, winning just a college football playoff semifinal match and making the national championship?
Well, this year they're bringing back over 70% of the roster, so that's already a huge bonus. When it's obviously not the entire team, but you're basically running it back. And last year that TCU game probably left the most sour just taste in their mouth. And Harbaugh is not going to be there for the first 3 games, but obviously it's Eastern Carolina, UNLV, and I'm not for sure who the third team is. I believe it's a MAC school, actually.
I think it might be. It's either Toledo or BG.
I believe it's Toledo.
It might be. No, it is. Actually, it is Toledo. I think it is Toledo. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you're gonna miss 3 games, those are the 3 games to miss. No disrespect to any of those programs. Toledo won the MAC last year, but I mean, that's not who Michigan is worried about. So they'll be splitting up, head coaching duties between, I believe, 4 coaches in those first 3 games. I believe Mentor gets Eastern Carolina, Moore gets the 3rd game, and I believe Mike Hart and another associate that I cannot remember right now is splitting the first and second half of that 2nd game against UNLV. But, I mean, bringing back 70% of the roster is a good start, obviously. And, I don't know, for me, Michigan going into the last 2 seasons has felt really good. I mean, like, they it feels like there's just a positive energy around the program, but this year to me it just seems like it's off a little bit. I'm not for sure why. Maybe it is just with all this, I guess recruiting violation stuff that they've reported. I don't know. I don't. It just feels off for me. But what will turn that off is when they play Penn State, because that game, I mean, yes, they do play other Big Ten competition before that, but I mean,
That's when you're going to tell how
realistically,
legit
all
Michigan
three
is this
teams
year.
should only lose one game max in the Big Ten. So I mean, that's going to be the tell-all for what's going to happen in this season.
And interesting enough is that game that Michigan goes on the road to State College
Yes.
to take on Penn State. It's not the whiteout. It's the Big Noon. They're moving Big Noon this year for that ball game. So that'll be interesting to see how that game will pan out. But that's the big three in the Big Ten East. But I think there's one more name that sort of needs to be hinted on a bit here, and that's the Maryland Terrapins. I mean, they're of course they got to try to get through the Big Three, which is going to be very difficult for them. But
Right.
they've built a pretty solid program over there in college, at College Park there in Maryland with the Terrapins. I mean, they've got Talua Tungavailoa back once again for, I believe it's his final year of eligibility. He might have a COVID year with it.
I think
he's listed
this
as a
is his
senior.
last full year of eligibility.
Yes, but they got Talua Tungavailoa once again, and they were a team that scared Ohio State right before that Michigan game last year, and a lot of people don't remember that game. So, it'll be interesting to see, but
a big thing with them is that, so we hit it on earlier, their offensive coordinator, Dan Enos, is at Arkansas. And who did Maryland hire as their OC? Josh Gaddis, former Miami OC as of last year, former Michigan OC. And there is a lot of hype around this Maryland program, but it just seems where Josh Gaddis gets control of an offense, and that offense kind of gets limited, which is what Maryland, under Dan Enos, their passing game has been pretty good, and their offense is why they win games. So with Josh Gaddis, we're gonna have to see if he does progress. Maybe not on a big stage. Miami under a new hire Cristobal was a huge stage. Obviously if you're at Michigan, you're on a huge stage. So maybe going to Maryland is we're gonna see a different Josh Gaddis, or maybe we get the same limited offensively system with Josh Gaddis.
And that's interesting there to have that that is your hire after having such really a sparked offense.
Yeah.
To really talk about over the past couple of years, but Maryland's going to be a respectable team. I think that they're going to be the best team out of the Big Ten East. Not a team that's contending for a national championship this year. But we'll have to see how it plays out for Maryland. But we're going to go to the Big Ten just how we did with the SEC. First, we'll start in the West. Give me your rankings of the Big Ten West right now. How you feeling of who's going to win the West?
I am going to go Wisconsin winning the West, which I feel like is very popular. I am going to trust them to beat Iowa head-on-head, or head-to-head matchup, I guess.
That game is in Madison, by the way.
Yes. And I think that might be the difference. Maybe they, Wisconsin loses 2, maybe even 3 games. Who knows, really. I'm going to go Iowa second. I'm going to go Nebraska. Nebraska 3.
Okay.
I think they will be bowl eligible for the first time in a while.
Yeah.
Man, this is
that's tough.
Okay, well, I'll go from 7 up, because that is
okay.
I'm going to go Northwestern last.
Okay.
I'm going to go Purdue second to last.
Yeah, because they lost a lot. Like, they did. They did. Aiden O'Connell's gone.
Right.
He was a lot of that offense.
I'll go with Illinois to finish fourth.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I don't know. It's a really hard prediction because I think Northwestern is kind of a shoe-in for last.
Yeah.
But really from second or third on down, I mean, it's kind of
So you're gonna
just
go
all over.
Illinois 4 and then Minnesota
5.
5. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I'll give you mine now. I think I agree with you. I think Wisconsin's winning the West.
Seems
Luke
just very
Fickell,
popular.
It does. I think Iowa's finishing second. I think Iowa's being 8-9 wins. Once again, they're going to be a respectable ball club. Nothing too crazy, but they're going to be Iowa. They're going to have a great defense. They're going to be a solid ball club, but I think that offense will get back to being at least competent this year. But below them, I'm kind of high on Nebraska, but I don't think I'm as high as you are. I'm seeing.
I don't know if I'm
know.
high on Nebraska. I'm just low on the West.
Low on the rest of the West, and
Yeah.
part of that sits with me and Minnesota maybe, but I think Minnesota gets third. I think Nebraska gets fourth. I think Illinois gets fifth, and I think Purdue gets sixth, and I think Northwestern gets seventh there in the West. So very similar. Where we just really switch, almost 3, 4, 5. We
Yep.
switch around.
Which that could happen.
Yeah,
100%.
it could happen.
And it could
happen.
flip in 3, 4, 5 in a different way than we have.
It very much could, and Purdue could possibly maybe even make a crack at Illinois or somebody like that, or maybe Minnesota. It could happen, but now to the East and now to the big one. I'll ask you first, do you want to go bottom top or do you want to go top bottom here?
We'll go bottom top.
Okay, we'll go bottom top here.
So for me, this is going to be surprising for everyone. I think I have Michigan State finishing last.
Yeah, I can
I'm
see
just
it. I can.
not high on them, which is crazy
I
because
know.
2 years ago,
I know.
it's just
It just
man.
goes to show you how good Kenneth Walker really was that year,
yeah,
man. I
really.
mean,
and it shows you too how crazy the transfer portal can be.
yeah.
I go Indiana second to last. Oh man. I'm gonna go Maryland fifth.
Okay.
And then top 3.
You're forgetting Rutgers.
Sorry, Rutgers will finish fourth.
Now top 3.
Top 3. Third, Ohio State.
Okay.
Okay, let me preface this before I say this. I actually do not know who I have winning the East because I all have 1, 2, and 3 at
Tied.
1 loss. I have Michigan beating Ohio State again. I have Ohio State beating Penn State. And I have Michigan beating Penn State. No.
Penn State beating
Penn
Michigan.
State beating Michigan.
Penn State beating Michigan. Ohio State
And
beating Penn State, and Michigan beating Ohio State.
Whatever the tiebreaker would be in that situation, that is who I have winning the East.
Okay.
So I honestly, realistically, I don't, because I believe the tiebreaker goes off of records of who they played, throughout the rest of the conference. I could be completely wrong on that, but I believe that's how the Big Ten does it, and obviously I cannot predict how that will play out. So whoever would win the tiebreaker in the East, that is who I have winning, and then the tiebreaker would go from second to third down, obviously.
So there's an 8-step process in
Yes.
the Big Ten
And
for a 3-way
yes.
tie. It says step 1 is the records of the 3 teams tied will be compared based on winning percentage in games between the tied teams.
So just mutual games.
Yes. So that
And
would,
obviously I cannot predict that.
I was going to say
because
that one is. Yeah, I mean, well,
there's no way to really predict what
I
the
mean,
records would be.
Exactly.
So that's why I'm giving you exactly what I think will happen, and whatever plays off of that is what I will have. If I had to choose, so if I had to go from bottom to top of who I think would win, I'll go Penn State 1, Michigan 2, then Ohio State 3. But my situation is I actually don't know who would win.
Yeah, in that 3-way tie style of situation there.
Yeah,
But
and an 8-step process. It's very random of what would happen.
Yeah. And now I'll give you mine. I'll go from bottom top. I like Michigan State finishing last two.
Yeah.
I do. I really do. I don't think that team is going to be very competitive this year. I don't, which is unfortunate for Mel Tucker, who really rose them up, as mentioned in 2021.
And it also shows how
Yeah.
sometimes a contract extension could look very good
Yes.
to a program,
Yes.
and sometimes it just does not happen.
Pan out. And I think the team, I agree with you. I think Indiana finishes in 6th. I think Rutgers finishes 5th. I think Maryland finishes 4th. And my top 3, I'm just like, I keep switching on it. I like that 3-team tie scenario. I do. But I don't know. You know, something about that kickoff in being a noon kick and not a whiteout for Penn State against Michigan. I don't know what it is. Because I really do truly think that Penn State could win that game you know, in a battle. But just the atmosphere, how big whiteout is for that area and going there. I think Michigan gets that done. I think they do. I think they beat Penn State. But I'm still torn on that Ohio State-Michigan game. I really want to believe Ohio State makes those adjustments. I want to believe that Jim Knowles makes those adjustments. But, you know, my gut's saying no. You know, my gut's saying Michigan goes and goes undefeated and wins the Big Ten East, and Ohio State finishes 2nd, and you know, Penn State ends up in 3rd. You know, it also could depend, you know, if Ohio State loses that game to Notre Dame early in the season and then comes out and feels like they have something to prove and goes and beats Michigan and goes and beats Penn State, you know, I could see that happening. I could. But what it comes down to between that Ohio State and Michigan, what really I see is what is Ryan Day and company and that coaching staff and in that office going to do any differently that they've been all talk the past year and a half about, this is what we're going to do differently facing against the Wolverines. This is what we're going to do differently. We're going to go get Jim Knowles, who's one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. He's going to help us. I don't know. He didn't help us against Michigan.
Right.
I mean, that's what I'm seeing because the same issues happen. Lack of tackling, lapses in coverage. Just the whole scheming in that Michigan game last year had me boggling. Like, it had my mind boggled in that situation because I was sitting there offensively. Chip Trayanum was at running back for a majority of that game and hadn't played very many snaps the entire year. With Dallin Hayden
I believe the
healthy,
week before was the first time he was taking running back snaps at all.
It was a very perplexing situation. Not to mention using 2 tight end sets with also G. Scott on the field, who didn't see a lot of action. Because Stover was really the main go-to tight end, and not to mention defense. The Ohio State really sold out because they said we're going to get pressure. We got to get pressure on McCarthy, and they left their cornerbacks on an island, and guys like Cameron Brown and Cameron Martinez were out there looking silly on defense by Michigan's wide receivers. And unless something in the minds of that coaching staff just stops trying to out-coach Michigan and be so,
they think too hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, if you really go back to it, we were running 0 when J.J. McCarthy really wasn't in the game at all. I mean, like, he looked
he struggled
shaky.
in that first
and when
quarter.
We were
of that
just
ball
playing
game.
standard cover 2, cover 4, cover 3, and then we went to 0 and we were just blitzing super heavy and just leaving guys on islands, and it was just really
it didn't seem
odd.
It made me scratch my head, and until a change can be made, I'm gonna go with the Wolverines. I think they go. I initially had Ohio State, but now I think I'm going Michigan. I'm going Michigan. Winning the East, 12-0 in the regular season. Now, I think it's obvious who we both think though is going to win the Big Ten, and it's going to be whoever comes out of the East. Though.
Yeah,
and
whoever wins the East. I just don't think a Wisconsin team that is not new. I guess maybe next year.
Yeah.
I just think it's a year too early.
Yeah.
Maybe even 2 years too early. Who really knows?
Yeah. You never know. Still, it's a new program, it's new coaching staff, new all of it.
Yeah, I just the Big Ten is going to be. They'll produce a really good playoff team.
Yeah.
Whoever
Or
it is,
maybe
Michigan,
two,
Penn
maybe
State.
two. It could be
Yeah,
it could be
exactly. So I'm just looking forward to get into Big Ten play.
two. And yeah, I mean,
So I don't know, but let's go to the next conference that we're going to cover. What's the next conference we're going to be covering?
we're gonna go to the ACC. We're gonna go to the Atlantic Coastal Conference because of, it's an interesting conference at this point. Personally, I think you can agree with this statement here. I think it's the worst of the Power Fives this
Probably.
year. I think
Maybe
now,
not up
I'm
top.
talking maybe top to bottom, or really even in the middle.
Right.
I think it's gonna produce the worst of the Power Fives, but. There's at least one team up there that both you and I are very high on this year to go and take care of business.
And we actually talked about them a little bit earlier.
Yes, we did talk about them a little bit earlier, and their Week 1 matchup against the LSU Tigers. That's the Florida State Seminoles. You and I are both very high on this Seminoles squad. I mean, Jordan Travis, this kid's going to be good this year. I have high
You
hopes.
could see it last year,
yeah.
like coming on to
At the tail end of the season.
tail end of the season. He really started getting in his zone, and yeah, man, I think talking about Heisman, we were talking about Aller. We'll get into Heisman talk with the Big 12 and Pac-12 later,
Yes.
but I mean, this kid could really take it by storm if Florida State has a great season.
And Jordan Travis. I mean, they ended up what? They finished 10-3 last year after a bowl win against Oklahoma.
Yes.
And a lot of people have been very high on them and have been very high on Jordan Travis. And I think that they, I said earlier, I think they're losing to LSU. But the big thing of what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to take down Top Dog. And Top Dog, at least within the past 10 years, has been the Clemson Tigers. They did get back to the top of the conference last year, granted after some demoralizing losses, but you are not very high on this Clemson squad, are you, this year?
I'm not. I'm worried about that defense, which is crazy to say about a Clemson team. This defensive line is losing just a crazy amount of production, and also Trenton Simpson at linebacker is gone. Man, it's gonna be. I'm worried because that secondary it already got tested last year when they couldn't get pressure, and now this year they're losing that production up front that is going to help that secondary out, and I really think that this secondary could be in trouble when it comes to teams that can pass the ball, and they'll face plenty of teams that can pass the ball at a good level. I think offensively they're going to be solid. I think they will be better from last year just based off of scheming and spacing on the field in general, and also who's that quarterback, Cade Klubnik, excuse me. He was my favorite quarterback coming from that class, so I have extremely high regards of him. Who he's throwing the ball to, I'm a little worried about, and that offensive line has been exposed before. I think that the fact that the transfer portal has not been utilized is starting to show, because I really do think that there's some holes on this Clemson Tiger team.
Yeah, and I think there are too. I think they're still going to be competitive this year. I still could see them in the ACC championship this year. I don't know if I see them winning, but another team that's got, speaking of Heismans, speaking of guys that are going to be in Heisman races, Drake May in North Carolina. They were a very interesting team last year, had some very ugly losses, had some pretty decent wins, and ended up in a thriller with Oregon in the Holiday Bowl last year.
They did, yes.
And I can't remember if they pulled that game. That was the missed extra point, wasn't it?
I believe so.
Yes, it was. I still can't remember who pulled out that game, but I think they're going to be solid again this year. But I think they lose a lot of other pieces around them. You know, they've lost countless. I mean, top receivers gone. They're losing some pieces that, you know, and Josh Downs, like, you know, he was ACC, and yes, it was Oregon on that missed extra point that did get that victory over UNC. So they ended up finishing the season 9-5 after that loss in the ACC championship game.
They were 8-2 at one point.
Yes, they were.
Like that. They were very high, and then I believe they lost to Georgia Tech.
Yes,
and that's kind of what started spiraling.
At home too, they lost that game. So,
you know, they were starting to get playoff kind of.
Yeah.
You know, if they were to pull the ACC championship game out, and they just never got to it.
They never did. Do you think it's going to be anything different this year for the Tar Heels and Mac Brown?
I do. I think that they brought in some good pieces in the portal, and they're bringing back about 65 to 70% of returning production, but it's kind of the impact that they're losing more that's going to hurt them. I think that the fact that they are doing a divisionless conference championship game will help them because it just gives everyone an equal playing field. You don't have to worry about finishing first. You can be second, and that's good enough.
Yeah.
And I think that is perfect for everyone not named Florida State.
Yeah.
And obviously when you have a first-round draft pick at quarterback and Heisman, favorite, not the favorite, but a hopeful, I guess. Yeah. And an offense that is going to be good, obviously, we know. My worries are still with that defense. I mean, we've seen it last year, and we've seen it basically under a lot of these Mac Brown teams. The defense just isn't good enough. But, I mean, for an offense that produced Sam Howell, I mean, I have no question about it that Drake May he's going to be great.
Now, we've talked about those top three. Is there really anybody else that you'd like to highlight on from the ACC?
Wake Forest.
Really? Okay.
That is going to be. I mean, we've seen maybe you said a highlight. I mean, this might be a low light.
Oh, okay.
This is a Wake Forest team that's been ranked for the last 3 seasons for the most part. They're known for this high prolific offense, this mesh scheming, very simple but effective.
Yeah.
Scheming. And man, they have lost a lot of talent. Sam Hartman, A.T. Perry.
Yeah.
Just to name 2. And man, I think.
I mean, they went 7-5 last year in the regular season too, and that's a lot.
Which is crazy.
I know,
because they were,
they were in the ACC championship the year before.
They finally, I mean, like they broke through after being kind of, just a program.
Yeah.
And I think that we might be seeing that happening again.
Yeah.
They might be just going back to being a program, which is unfortunate because Wake Forest, man, whenever they played someone big, you could never count them out because who knows if they're going to score 50, you know? Those Clemson games were really fun to watch, man.
Last year was a barn burner, man.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because, it's just, I think this offense might be coming back down, and their defense has never really been great. So I would watch out for Wake Forest to maybe go back.
So there's little highlights there, and that's really not much else to really hang on in the ACC.
I mean, there's a lot of teams that could be eligible.
Yeah.
You got Duke, who is looking up.
Yeah.
Miami, they're looking to come back.
Yeah.
Last year was obviously a
very
horrendous
year for them.
season, according to expectations. They have a game against Texas A&M, I believe, week 3 this season. Week 2 in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
So they're coming back. Last year they lost 17-9 to Jimbo and Texas A&M, and they're going to want to get that game back. They had a lot of just bouncing around at quarterback between now Mizzou quarterback Jake Garcia and TBD. But I think Miami is going to be not good,
but could make a bowl.
Yeah, they'll
could be
probably be
bowl
around
eligible.
7 to 8 wins. NC State, they're transitioning from a Tim Beck offense, which he goes to Coastal Carolina. They lose Devin Leary. What are they going to look like?
Yeah.
Pitt, they get Phil Yurkovich and Frank Signetti back together. They were at Boston College 2 seasons ago. Signetti leaves last season. Yurkovich new into the system this season. I like them a lot, but they do lose a few NFL players. A few players to the draft, I should say.
Yeah.
Speaking of losing players to the draft, Syracuse, Sean Tucker, Garrett Williams, just to name a few. But I mean, Syracuse, they were I believe like 8-3 or no.
I think they were 6-1.
Yeah, they were 6-1 and then finished I think with like 7 wins or like 8 wins or something like that.
Yeah.
They stumbled down the back end of the season. Virginia, second year Tony Elliott, former Clemson offensive coordinator. Can they get things turned around? Virginia Tech under Brent Pry, second year, did not go nearly as well as they wanted to last season. What did they look like? This conference is it's a team of I don't want to be rude, but it just seems like a conference of misfits kind of. It's just we don't really know what's going to happen with them because either of them could win 8 or 9 games or they could win 4 or 5.
Yeah,
it's kind of just how it is, and it's unfortunate to say that considering we're hearing all the rumors about the ACC either abandoning or either adding teams. We don't know what's happening with that either.
I mean, they're going to be close to where they might be living for their Power 4 lives.
Really, it's this conference is going to be fun, but going with divisionless conference championship, who do you think is going to be the top 2 teams in the conference?
I have Florida State and Clemson. I do. I do. Clemson. I think they could have a down year. I think they really could. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to think about this Clemson team, but they showed some flashes there. But then they ended. Part of me is just trying to think about trends as well. They ended the season in not great position last year. Clemson. They lost to South Carolina
through the end of that year.
Yeah, and then they ended up losing to Tennessee in a bowl game where most of Tennessee's NFL talent was not on that roster for that. They were not playing in that Orange Bowl game. So Clemson, I don't know, but I just feel like the big key is that they beat North Carolina at home.
Yeah.
That's why I think I have them there, is that I think they beat North Carolina at home. I think that they do that, and I think Florida State can get them. I do think Florida State loses a conference game. I do. It might be to Clemson. It might not be to Clemson in that regular season matchup.
It will be on the road for the Seminoles.
It will be. It will be on the road for the Seminoles. As I said earlier, I think they lose to LSU, but that's not to say that this team can't possibly go undefeated or possibly go into the playoff with 1 loss.
Right.
They have the schedule to do it.
They will be the favorite to win the conference.
Yeah, correct. I think they will be the favorite to win the conference, and I have them there. I do. I have Florida State there. I have them playing Clemson. I have them beating Clemson, and I have Florida State taking the ACC this year. Now to you.
I'm going to agree. I think Florida State does win the ACC, and I actually have kind of an odd team. I don't really think people will have this as much. I like Pitt. I mean, I like these Boston College teams that were with Signetti and Yurkovich offense.
Yeah.
I think we may see an 8-4 Pitt get in there. It could just be a cannibal conference just because of how random it is. It's going to be a fun conference to watch. Is it going to be the best football to watch? Probably not. But is it going to be wild and crazy and wacky? And who knows if Florida State is realistically, who knows if Florida State is going to even just breeze through the conference. Maybe we have another team that just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
We don't really know, and I think, I like North Carolina a lot. I have problems with that defense, and I always have had defense problems with them. They, just like Florida State, they're returning about 70% of production. But, I mean, Florida State returning 70% production on a team that was really on fire at the end of the year. I mean, I think the momentum is just so heavy right now. I like the Seminoles in the ACC.
So, that wraps that up real quick with the ACC. And now let's go. Do you want to segue into the Big 12, or do you want to segue possibly talk about Notre Dame with really their ties to the ACC?
Oh, let's do Notre Dame.
Let's go.
I mean,
Notre Dame.
If they were to join a conference, contractually, it would be the ACC.
Yes.
I know a lot of people want them to go into the Big 10, but I mean, they basically, during the COVID year, they played in the ACC championship. So, I mean, might as well talk about the Fighting Irish. And I know we talked about them a little bit earlier with them playing Ohio State in week 3, I believe, week 4. One of those 2 weeks.
The Notre Dame and Ohio State. That's week 4. That's week 4.
Week 4. But I don't know how to really feel about this Fighting Irish team. As we're recording, it's 5:34. They were up 42-0 on Navy, which is to be expected. But there's one man that has been talked about a lot, and you want to go into that guy real quick?
Oh, I do. Sam Hartman. I mean, he's been one of the best college quarterbacks the past 2 years. He's having he had great times at Wake Forest, and as you mentioned, that Ohio State game is very big for Notre Dame, and I think that they could win that game because of Sam Hartman. He's just, I don't know. I think that Notre Dame is going to be a Notre Dame team. Marcus Freeman. I actually was in attendance the day that he got his first win as head coach of Notre Dame. It was that Cal game where they won, almost lost on a Hail Mary there to end that ball game, but they ended up beating Cal. They got that victory, and that was the first win of the Marcus Freeman era. And I think he's a good head coach for the program. But Notre Dame's going to be Notre Dame. I think that they could possibly go 11-1. I do see them losing a game. But the big one I have them is USC. I think that Notre Dame can take care of business at home against USC. But I don't know. They do have a pretty tough schedule, and I think they'll drop a game. I do. I think it'll happen, but it'll be to seen. I have them at 10-2 with losses, I believe, to Ohio State, and I can't remember one of those games that they faced a reputable program and just don't get it done. I think it might actually be Pitt. Might be the one that I have them losing to. That's going to be tough for them. But they've got some tough games. I think they're going to be a solid program. And as you said, we're recording this right as they're kicking off the college football season, and they are looking to. I think they did end up taking a victory there over Navy. I don't know if it's over yet, but it's looking pretty over. But
by time the final comes in, Notre Dame will be 1-0.
Yes. So that'll be the final of that game, and Notre Dame's off to a good start of the season. I think they'll be a solid team to keep an eye out for this year, and especially with a guy like Sam Hartman. I think they can do it, but what's going to be the situation without Tommy Rees? We got a little bit of a glimpse of it while it's happening currently with the Week 0 game against Navy. Going against them. Granted, Navy's not the best team, but a team regardless. And they went and they were up last time we checked. As we said, it was 42-0. So Sam Hartman's got some talent there.
I have Notre Dame actually winning 8 games, 8 or 9. It could bounce back and forth. I don't know. I like Marcus Freeman as a head coach. I just think, it's only his second year. There's still going to be some growing pains in some of the things that they do. I believe Ohio State will win. I believe USC is just not a great matchup for USC.
Yeah.
Or for Notre Dame, excuse me. Mm-hmm. And I actually do have them losing to Pitt. So, I think that's just how that bounces back. And the USC and Pitt game are USC is right before their bye week, and Pitt is right. That's their first game off their bye week. This Notre Dame team is they're going to be good, obviously. I just still think there's going to be some growing pains going throughout the system still.
Yeah. I think so too. I think you might see that for Notre Dame, but like, I mean, you never know with the Fighting Irish. You know, they're usually having some solid years here and there, but I don't know. We'll see how it plans out for them. But now we'll segue into the Big 12, which might be, at least in my opinion, was the most exciting conference last year in most regards.
There's no boring games in that conference.
There are no boring games. I mean, Kansas was back to being good again.
Oh, man, that was fun.
People forget that Kansas State won the conference championship last year and then, unfortunately, had to face Alabama in the Sugar Bowl.
The Big 12 had a team in the national championship.
Exactly.
I mean, did it go great?
Exactly.
No, but
it
that's
was
great for
and
the
that's
conference.
Good. It's in TCU. I mean,
right. You know, it's not Texas. It's not Oklahoma. It's not Oklahoma State.
Exactly. It's TCU.
Right.
And so we'll see how it plays out. I mean, you know, TCU is the, you know, they're not the reigning top dog, but they are a team that ended up making the national championship. They lost a lot, though. They did. Max Duggan
brought back a lot, though.
They did. They did bring back a lot. Max Duggan is gone. Quentin Johnston is gone. But they, like I said, they do bring
Miller
back.
Is gone.
Yeah, correct. They do bring back a lot, and they do have Sonny Dykes leading the way once again. Do the Horned Frogs.
Hodgson, the cornerback, their CB1, gone as well. I believe he went to the Vikings. So, but I mean, talk about the portal class. It's pretty solid. They actually brought in quite a few SEC guys, which, you know, maybe was eye-opening after, you know, obviously bringing a few SEC guys is not going to close that gap to Georgia enough, but, you know, that was eye-opening for them as well, even though it was the national championship game. I mean, there was no part of that game that was competitive, really. But I don't know, man. This TCU team, they're looking reloaded with some misfits on some high-end programs, so whether they can turn them around or what happens, I think they're going to be in the top 4 in this conference.
I think they will be. They'll be competitive again this year, and now to the reigning conference champions, and that's the Kansas State Wildcats. They lose Adrian Martinez. They lose Deuce Vaughn, obviously one of the most electric players in college football last year. Will Howard does return, though, who saw a lot of playing time at quarterback for them. What do you think about the Wildcats? Can they repeat?
Oh, man, I love this. I love this coaching staff. Colin Klein, former Wildcat. I mean, I believe it was 2012.
It was 2012.
Yes, that season, man, he was a fantastic quarterback for them, and that was a great season for the Wildcats as well. Chris Kleiman, I'm a huge fan. When the Notre Dame job was open, I was a big advocate for him getting that job. Obviously, they went Marcus Freeman. But, man, I love Chris Kleiman as a head coach. And if Kansas State it's a nice job, but if a bigger job comes open somewhere in the Midwest, you know, like if, in Oklahoma were to happen, you know, obviously Venables will be there, I think, for a long time. I mean, they're building a great program, and that's we'll get into them here in a sec. But man, this Kansas State has been built into a winning culture under these past few years, and I mean, Will Howard is probably going to be the starting quarterback. Obviously this team is probably not as well known on names, but I think that you're going to see a lot of names made in that Kansas State program this year.
I'm going to agree with you there, and you kind of hit it on the bigs of the programs in the Big 12. Two teams that are having their final year in the Big 12, Texas and Oklahoma. First, let's go to the Longhorns. I mean, this team talent-wise should win the Big 12. I mean, when you look at them on paper, Texas is Texas. Right. They have a great recruiting class, but Steve Sarkisian has not been able to get the job done. Period.
And realistically, everywhere he's gone,
exactly,
he's not gotten the job done at the level that he should be. So, with that talent, can he finally break through and actually do the dang thing? That'll be the thing to watch out for, because, man, this group is special.
Yeah.
First starting out just at quarterback. Oh, man. I'm a big Quinn Ewers fan.
I am too.
obviously you're losing Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson at running back. It doesn't matter. I mean, they're bringing in 5-star running backs. This group is it is really, really good.
Yeah.
Xavier Worthy, a receiver, is one of my favorite receivers in this class, and for me, nationally, he is my wide receiver 2 behind Marvin Harrison Jr., and that's not a shame because Marvin Harrison Jr. he could play in the NFL now.
Yes.
But I love Xavier Worthy. I think he will be around a first-round pick, hopefully. I mean, he has the size, he has the speed, his cut ability is fantastic, his routes are smooth. I don't know. This offense should be very good, but once again, can it all be put together behind Steve Sarkisian?
That is correct, and there's Texas, final year in the Big 12. Now for Oklahoma. You hinted on it just a little bit. They got Brent Venables back once again. They have Dylan Gabriel back at quarterback once again. They started off really shaky last year, but they somewhat righted the ship. They made a bowl game. It wasn't the Oklahoma of the Lincoln Riley era, and nobody really thought.
They started 3-0 last year,
yes.
and then things kind of just
I think
fell off the rails.
It was the TCU and it was the TCU and the Kansas games back-to-back weeks that just really put that.
And
team.
Then that Texas game really solidified how new this program is, because this is Oklahoma we're talking about, but this is not Oklahoma. I mean, when Lincoln Riley left, that program was gutted to the gills, and I mean, Venables did what he could, and honestly, those first 3 or 4 weeks were very good, and the fact that they almost beat Florida State last year in their bowl game is it was very impressive. And although this, for a little bit of going forward, I think Oklahoma may win 7 or 8 games this year, but I mean, I think this program is heading in the right direction. Like I said, it was a complete rebuild, essentially. So I like where the program is at. Maybe the wins are not coming this year, or maybe even next year. But I think this program is going to be well versed for future competition.
So now to really the players that were toward the middle of the pack in the Big 12 last year. Let's talk about Baylor. Let's talk about Texas Tech. Let's talk about Kansas. Let's talk about those 3 and Oklahoma State. Let's talk about those 4 programs. All 4 made a bowl. All 4 were bowl eligible last year. But a couple of those teams, Kansas started off red hot. They had a really good start of the year, and then things sort of fell apart toward the middle of the year whenever they got into the gauntlet of that Big 12 schedule. And they started to fall a little bit. Oklahoma State, same deal. They were competing with TCU, and then you really never heard of them ever again after that loss to TCU.
Well, that also comes with Spencer Sanders going down, and now Spencer Sanders at Ole Miss. We're going to see, for the first time in a while, what an Oklahoma State without Spencer Sanders is going to be able to do. So, also, speaking on another team that you mentioned, Baylor, from last year to the year before, Oklahoma State and Baylor were playing for us. Oklahoma State almost made the playoff.
Yeah.
And they were about 4 inches short.
Yes.
And, Baylor's the one that beat them in that game. And the next year, they were in the middle of the pack.
Correct.
Of what a really crazy Big 12 looked like. And, I love Dave Aranda. I love Mike Gundy. But can they get back up to the top of the Big 12 is going to be the question that I want to see.
And I know you were big on one of those teams that I mentioned there toward the middle of the pack. I'm somewhat big on Kansas. I think Kansas will have another respectable year. I think they can go
bringing back a lot of production.
That's what I'm saying. Is that they were 7-5 last year in regular season. They had a good year for Kansas. The Jayhawks, they're generating some hype around that football program there. But to the team that you're high on, Texas Tech Red Raiders. What are you seeing in this squad this year?
I love Joey McGuire as a head coach, man. I think let's go doomsday for Texas A&M. If Jimbo Fisher were to just another stinker of a year and they trigger that buyout, the first guy I would call would be Joey McGuire. I think he is a fantastic head coach from coaching Cedar just 6 years ago in high school. And now he is the head coach of Texas Tech, which was the bottom of the barrel when it came to the Big 12 a few years ago. And now, last year they beat Texas, and, they beat some other teams. I think this Texas Tech team, like I said earlier with Auburn, I do not have the logistics to prove what they'll do, but it's just a gut feeling that I think this team is going to be fighting for, not the playoff. I don't think they're a TCU from last year, but, going forward, I think, that Oregon game, week 2, is going to be
at home.
That is going to be
at Jones AT&T Stadium there in
Lubbock. If they beat Oregon, watch out for the Raiders.
Yeah, it's going to be. It's a big game for them. Week 2. Week 2's got a lot of great games.
Week 2, man.
It's going to be a good week.
That is when. That is classic college football right there.
So now to really the final part of the Big 12, and that's the 4 new teams, all from really the group of 5. 3 of them from the American, and then the other being BYU, who is an independent. But BYU, UCF, Houston, and Cincy. Who do you think of those 4 can have the best season and have the best success their first season in the Big 12?
I believe it's Houston, and for a big reason, Dana Holgerson's just been here before. West Virginia, those were some great teams with Will Greer, David Sills, Gary Jennings, the Stills brothers on the defensive line. I mean, those were some great West Virginia teams, and he's been here before. He knows, a lot of these teams, what they're going to do. They're losing Clayton Tune. They're losing Tank Dell on the offense, and that's huge. And I believe they lost their best tackle in the portal as well. So it's going to be a little bit of replenishment, but just for the reason that not Houston, I'm sorry, Dana Holgerson, he's been here before. I don't think it's going to phase him nearly as much.
I gotta say I want to be high on UC. I want to be high on Cincinnati. I do. I want to be high on UCF too. I do because Gus Bus. I mean, hey, they
Gus Bus is a fun ride.
It is a fun ride. It is sometimes can be a rocky ride, but it's a fun ride. Yeah. But they just have both those teams just have really tough schedules this year, and that's why I'm sitting there and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how it's gonna go for them, but now we'll go rank them. We'll go rank them Big 12. Let's go top 8. Let's go top 8. Or do you want to go do all of them?
Let's do all of them.
Let's do all of them.
We're only leaving 4 teams out. Let's be inclusive.
Okay, let's go all 12 into Big 12.
Are we going top to bottom or bottom to top?
Let's go actually 14 teams now. I messed them up.
Well, yeah.
Because next year it'll be back to 12. But let's go bottom top. Let's go bottom top in the Big 12. What are we thinking here this year?
Okay. Finishing last for me will be Cincinnati.
Okay.
I'm not a huge Scott Satterfield fan, and alongside with that, I do not like that they are changing coaches heading into a new conference. I don't think that is favorable.
Especially after having as much success as they did under Fickle.
Yes. Second to last, I will go Iowa State. I just don't think the talent is going to be there. I love Matt Campbell as a coach. I think he's a fantastic coach, actually. I just don't think the talent is going to be there, and I don't know if that's necessarily his fault. Because he's really over-recruited at Iowa State. We're going to go third to last. I will go with... I'll go with BYU.
Okay.
Like I said, I just don't think the talent's going to be there. I like the offense. But we'll have to see on that. Fourth to last, I will go with UCF.
Okay.
Talent will be there. I think the travel on the first year constantly is going to put a toll on them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's my bottom 4. Let's hear your bottom 4.
Okay, I'll go my bottom 4 then. I think I think I got 14th. I got Iowa State. I think Iowa State's going to finish last in conference. At 13th, I think BYU. I'm feeling BYU sitting 13th, as you said, with the talent. You know, I'm kind of high on UC. I feel like they might be able to crack a bit higher, but that's another team that I think is gonna maybe be in my bottom. I don't know. I switch back and forth with them, but I think third to last is gonna be. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna go with UC. I'm gonna go with Cincinnati there at third to last, and then fourth to last, finishing 10th in conference. I'm gonna go with Houston. I'm going to pick Houston there. I think that's where they're going to finish. Not that they're going to have a bad year. They got an interesting Week 1 matchup against UTSA, who's now in the American. But, not that Houston's going to be bad. It's just that the Big 12 is going to be such a hard conference to get through.
All right. To keep going from bottom to top, I'm going to go Houston finishing 5th to last.
So 9th.
I will go... Or
10th, actually, correction.
I'm going to go Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I thought about putting them really in my bottom 4. I did.
I will go with West Virginia.
Okay.
Man, this is crazy.
I know.
I'm going to go Kansas.
Okay.
I just think returning talent means they're not getting like too much better.
Yeah.
Man. Shoot. I will go with Baylor.
Okay.
And Oklahoma.
Okay.
Don't think they're going to be there yet.
So, to cap off for those, those trying to keep track at home, we still have Texas Tech, TCU, Texas, and Kansas State remaining in your ranking. Now, do you want me to go to mine so that we can get our top 4s? Okay. So my next 6 in the Big 12 are this. I said at 11th, we're going to sit there and we're going to have, I said Houston. So at 10th, I think it's going to be Oklahoma State. At 9th, I think it's going to be UCF. At 8th, I think it's going to be West Virginia. At 7th, I think it's going to be Oklahoma. At 6th, I think it's going to be... I think we're going to see Kansas there. And then... Or I haven't got Oklahoma State. Wait, I forgot to put Oklahoma State at the bottom. Oklahoma State, I think, is finishing just below West Virginia.
Okay.
So then I have one more to put. Oh, man. I'm going to put TCU at 5th. I think TCU finishes 5th.
That's fair.
So for those of you that are keeping track, Doc's top 4 remaining: Texas, TCU, Oklahoma, and Kansas State. My final 4 are Baylor, Texas.
Wait, hold on. What'd you say? I have Oklahoma out.
Oh, that's right. Who am I missing?
I have Texas Tech, Kansas
That's
State.
right. You have Texas Tech.
Texas and TCU.
Yes, you do have Texas Tech. Sorry about that. So he has Texas Tech, Texas, TCU, and Kansas State. I have Texas Tech, Texas, Baylor, and Kansas State in my top 4.
Okay, finishing 4th for me will be Texas.
Okay.
Not a personnel issue. It's a staffing issue.
Yep.
And then 3rd, I have TCU.
Okay.
And 1st, I have Kansas State.
Okay.
And 2nd, I have Texas Tech. But in my Big 12 championship, Texas Tech will win against Kansas State.
So he has Texas Tech, Kansas State in the championship, and the Red Raiders are taking home the Big 12 title. Now for me, my fourth team in the Big 12 is Texas Tech. I think they finished there. My 3rd team, I think, is Kansas State. My 2nd team is Texas, and I think Baylor wins the regular season. I don't know why, but I'm high on this team. I don't know what it is about this team, but I'm high on this team. Like you said, they went from winning the Big 12 to going really about 6-6 to I think they can go back to that. You never know. But I think Baylor wins the regular season. So Baylor, Texas is my prediction for a final there in the Big 12 championship, and I'm gonna pick Texas. I think the Longhorns. I don't know. I just feel like they got to do it sometime, and this year is the year for them to do it because it's gonna be likely the final year of the Quinn years. I think this is gonna be the year that Texas does it. I do.
All right. I mean, hey, I could see it, and a world where Texas is good, man. Oh, it's a good time. It's fun with USC being back. If the next time we get a highly touted USC Texas game, man. That'll be a fun time, man.
And speaking of USC, now to the conference that is likely in its dying year.
Rest in peace.
The Pac-12. So Pac-12, I think it's very spread out, but
this is the most insane conference.
It is
in the country.
It is.
It's because there's about 5 teams that can probably put up 40 points per game.
Yes.
Like seriously.
But, Pac-12, obviously USC's returning. Caleb Williams, they lost Jordan Addison, but they returned practically everybody else.
I mean, they're returning about 70% of their starters.
Exactly.
And the Heisman winner's coming back.
Exactly.
And
you have a Lincoln Riley-led offensive team.
10-3 last year. 2 losses to Utah and Tulane.
It would have been, I think it was 10-4 is what they would have done because they lost. No, it was 11-3 is what it was because they were 11-1 into that conference championship game. Yes.
So, but yeah, this USC team, man, is and it's crazy too because their offense was already good. Like everyone knows that this offense was elite, and now you're getting a defense that is much older. They have another year, and they're better, and they got more targets through the transfer portal. I mean, this defense is going to be way better. Whether it's good enough to win on the national stage, we're going to see, and we're going to find out. I don't know if it was really a talent issue or more of just a physicality issue. That's another thing with USC that we'll have to figure out, and we'll figure out quickly into conference play because some of these tougher teams like Oregon State, Utah, Oregon State gave them fits. I think they only won that game like 17-10 or so. Utah obviously ran right through them.
Yeah.
Even Tulane was, they were on par up front with them. So we're gonna figure out real quick what this USC team is made of. But man, they are on paper they are very, very good.
Yes, they are. And another team that I want to talk about in the Pac-12 that's really, really good is the team that won it last year and has won it in back-to-back seasons, the Utah Utes. Utah. They're still returning a lot too. Cam Rising is unfortunately starting the season a little bit, banged up.
Yeah, they're losing, Clark Phillips, Dalton Kincaid to the NFL, but outside of that, there aren't too many players that they lost that are going to be, I wouldn't say notable, but like big.
Yeah. And
with Utah, if there's going to be one thing that I'm going to always trust them on is their secondary.
Yeah.
Kyle Whittingham is a fantastic coach, and they've always just had a great defense under that program, and I'm going to trust whatever he does. And, losing Dalton Kincaid is big.
Yes.
But
they got replacements ready in there.
Yeah, they do. So I think this program is it's crazy because Utah, like, the last 3 or 4 years, really, they've been basically a top 15 program in the country.
Yeah.
And it's awesome to see, man.
It is. It is awesome to see from a program like that to be as successful as it's been recently from Utah. And it's now to really 2 teams that border each other state-wise, and I want to talk about. They used to be the former Pac-12 North, and both of them will be heading to the Big Ten in 2024. Washington and Oregon, very, very similar teams with stacked offenses, a little bit more questions on defenses,
right.
Great quarterbacks that are both Heisman hopefuls, and Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. Last year's game was a classic of a football game.
That was just...
That was an insane.
That's all you can ask for in a college football game.
That was an insane game to watch. It was, and both those teams are going to be good, but can they either get to the title game or win the title game this year?
Well, I think Washington is right there with USC. Honestly, I when Kalen DeBoer got hired at Washington, that was my best hire in that entire coaching cycle, and it showed because my goodness, were they good? Um, you know, Michael Penix had that great year in the COVID season with Indiana, and the year after, not so much. Whether that was him or not, we do not know. I'm going to assume not because he transferred to Washington and lit up the scoreboards. So, yeah, I mean, that dude he's talented, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And talking about another offense like you were talking about Oregon, this is an offense that is bringing back a lot of numbers, and Bo Nix is coming back, but I think the biggest thing we have to talk about is Kenny Dillingham is no longer the OC at Oregon. Dillingham obviously gets the job at Arizona State, and we will preview them a little bit as well. Oregon is they're going to be good, man. I think their defense is going to be way better. Dan Lanning gets his hands on that defense for another year. And they don't open up the season against Georgia, so that is a lot better for them. But yeah, I think Oregon and Washington are going to be. Washington's definitely going to be. I guess if I had to call anyone a dark horse, I guess it would be Washington, just because I still don't think people get how good they're going to be. I think the AP has them at 10 right now.
Yes.
But I don't know if people who follow the sport know how good they're actually going to be.
Yeah.
And I think Oregon's probably getting a little bit more attention just they know who Oregon is.
Yes. And I would agree with you there. I think that both those teams are going to be on about the same level. I think it's going to be a great game to watch once again this year between those two teams. But you talked a little bit about Oregon State, so let's talk about really what I think are the next two teams up, and really the next two teams that might have a shot to make some noise. I don't know about maybe make the conference championship, but definitely make some noise and make a bowl. UCLA and Oregon State. Both those teams, very solid programs. UCLA obviously losing DTR. They're losing Charbonnet to the draft. They're losing, they lost some talent on that offense, but they got Carson Steele, who is one of the best group of 5 players, period, last year for Ball State. Was a great running back for them, and he's going out to UCLA, and he's going to be great for them. Not to mention Oregon State is getting DJ Uiagalelei. He's going to be their quarterback for them this year. Can he step back up and be, what people thought he can be, or do we have another Kelly Bryant situation of a former Clemson quarterback struggling after transferring?
I think DJ is going to have a fantastic year. This is an offense where he's not going to have to throw the ball that much. His mobility is going to get used. And also, we've seen DJ. He's not a horrible quarterback. It's just when he has to throw the ball a lot, it's questionable. But this is an offense that's going to run the ball a ton. And they're going to be able to use his mobility. Finally, I feel like Clemson didn't do enough of that. And when they did, they were, doing wide zone reads and making him run around people rather than just, through him. His stature is unreal. I think DJ and this Oregon State offense are going to have an absolutely great year. We'll get to our top 25 later. Well, actually, after this wrap-up real quick, I guess we'll do a playoff prediction after this, and then we'll get into our top 25. But Oregon State they are very high on my list.
Yeah, I think they're going to have another solid season this year. I think they can be knocking on the door. I think UCLA can be solid too, but that's really the main players in the Pac-12. Everybody else is just kind of vying for maybe a spot to get maybe an upset here or there, maybe a spot to get into a bowl game, a couple of those teams there. But let's just get right into it and run down Pac-12 top to bottom. Who we think in the final year of this, likely the final year of this conference. Who are we thinking? is going from top to bottom. Let's go bottom up again.
Okay, you can go ahead and start, actually.
Okay, then I'll start. I think, looking at the bottom, I think it's going to be... I think we're going to have Cal at the bottom. We're going to go... Colorado second to last, which is a shock because we didn't really hit on Colorado because, Deion Sanders, 49 players in the transfer portal this year?
I believe so.
I mean, I get they're bringing a lot from Jackson State, but Jackson State couldn't even win the Celebration Bowl in the past 2 years. You got all this talent, but it's still young talent. That's the other thing, is that it's not like you're bringing in 5-star talent that's juniors and seniors.
And
you're bringing
you want to hit on the first game they play?
They play TCU in opener in Fort Worth.
Right.
I mean, that's a tough game. That's a tough game. You're facing the
That's a
team
tough
that was
way to
just in.
start.
Exactly. You're facing the team that just went to the national championship. It's tough.
And you get young players who might get smacked around against TCU early on. Who knows how they're going to respond in a locker room like that?
I know, and I want to be high on this team, but I don't know. I have them finishing second to last. I have Wazoo finishing third to last. I have Arizona finishing fourth to last and ninth. I have Stanford finishing eighth. I have Arizona State finishing seventh. And then now for the big top six. I'm going to go sixth. I'm going UCLA. I'm going... I know you might not like this, but I'm going Utah in fifth. I'm going Utah fifth. I'm going Oregon State in fourth. Oregon in third. Washington in second, and USC up top. I think USC does have 2 losses. I think they only have 1 conference loss. The only one that I see them is Washington on the road, because I think that's just going to be a very tough game for them. Oregon, I think they lose to Washington. I think they lose. I think I had them losing to Washington and USC, but they could also lose to Utah. That's the thing, is that any of those really top 5 teams, personally to me, can be shuffled almost anywhere. I think that the floor is a lot higher for USC than the other 4, but I think it could be shuffled around any way you want to look at it. But I have USC taking on Washington, both teams at 10-2 in the Pac-12 championship, and I have USC defeating Washington, winning the Pac-12 this year.
All right, I can definitely get behind that. Finishing last for me is Cal as well. That program just does not seem in a good state right now. I also have Colorado finishing second to last. I talked about it earlier. That program it's not going to be ready. And another thing is, if you get past that first layer of players, with injury, suspension, whatever it may be, that is basically just Colorado again, from last season, which, went 1-11, and, they got a new coach for a reason. Stanford will be finishing third to last for me. I love the hire. I just don't think it's going to be ready right now. I'm going to go Wazoo, fourth to last. I don't know. I like that program. I just think this conference is nuts, basically. I'm going to go Arizona, fifth to last. I like Jaden DeLora, but once again, I like Cam Ward as well for Wazoo. I think they're going to have to be better teams rather than, just be great quarterbacks for those teams. Finishing sixth to last. Man, this is tough.
I know.
I'm going to go...
It is.
I know, you probably won't like this. I'm going to go Oregon.
Okay.
I'm worried about Dillingham leaving. I think he was a big part of that success with Bo Nix. I'm gonna go Arizona State. Then I will go UCLA. Oh, This is hard. I'm gonna go Washington. Then I will go Oregon State. And in my Pac-12 championship game, I will have Utah and USC.
So a rematch?
Yes. And I believe it will end the same way. I have Utah winning my Pac-12.
3 straight.
I don't know. I like Utah again. I think that maybe they'll probably be the second team in. I think USC will probably they'll lose one game in conference. I think whether that's I don't know who that'll be to.
Yeah, I know.
It's just this is a cannibal conference.
It is.
I mean,
Top
once
to
you
bottom.
get the top, I like the top 9 out of it. I mean, Stanford, Colorado,
I know.
and Cal are the only teams I really don't like. I like Wazoo. I like Arizona just based off quarterback reasons. I love Delora and Cam Ward, but I mean, this conference is crazy.
I know.
So
it's
gonna
it's
be
insane.
I just don't think it's gonna be passable to get a Pac-12 team in the playoff
in the final year,
unless
really.
if one of them ends somehow 12-1.
Yeah.
But
I don't
that's
know. It's going to be tough to do that in that conference. And then you're also going to have to vie against probably a Big Ten, at large or an SEC at large. So,
right.
Speaking of that, let's just jump right into it. Let's talk about playoffs. Let's talk about the teams we got in the Final Four heading to the playoff this year. I'll let you start.
All right. So, based off of what we were going off of, I have Georgia at my 1. I have to. My Big Ten East winner, whether that would be... I'll put Penn State in there just because I had them at 1 if I wasn't doing that scenario. So I'll put Penn State at 2. But realistically, it's whoever wins the East will be at 2 with that tiebreaker. I don't know how that would play out. Florida State. Actually, I'll put Florida State at 2, and then the Big Ten East winner, Penn State or whoever you would want to say, at 3, and then 4. Whew. Oh man, this is
It's tough.
this is really tough. In my scenario, I think I would have to go probably Utah at 2 losses because I didn't really have another team with 1 loss. That went undefeated.
Well, you could have the other Big Ten team that's not tied there. I mean, because if it's a 3-way tie,
yeah, but I don't know. It doesn't. Both teams would. Michigan would lose at the very
end of the year. So the team that
Ohio State
would lose at the end of the year. So Michigan would likely be the team that would be there in your scenario.
Probably. I'm just gonna go Utah. I'll put my Pac-12 champion in there.
Okay.
2 losses at Utah. Pac-12 champ over a 1 loss. No, did not appear in a bowl game. Big Ten East team. So that I will have Georgia versus Utah, which I would take Georgia in.
Okay.
And then I would have, we'll say Penn State and Florida State. Man, that would be
that'd be a fun game.
That would be an amazing game to watch. Oh man, I think I would.
I think I'd go Florida. I'd say if I would do that situation, I'd go Florida State because of experience. In that game.
Yeah, I believe I would go Florida State. Yeah, I think I'm going to go Florida State versus Georgia. I think I'm going to go Florida State as my national champion.
Really? Okay.
They got Jared Verse, the best defensive player in the country, in my opinion. If not, then, top 3 at the worst. And then Jordan Travis, I think, is going to be enough. I think we're going to have a new college football champion in the Florida State Seminoles, and, that would be awesome.
Yeah. You're going to make a call with that one? Well, my playoff based off what I have, I have LSU winning the SEC, so I have LSU at 1. I have Michigan at 2 winning the Big Ten. I have Georgia at 3, and I have Ohio State at 4 because I have USC as the Pac-12 champion with 2 losses, Texas having 3 losses as the Big 12 champion, and the other Power 5 champ is Florida State with 2 losses in my opinion. So, and I also have Notre Dame with 2 losses, so then that takes them out. So that's my top 4. I think it's an SEC, Big Ten. LSU takes on Michigan in the Sugar Bowl, Ohio State and Georgia in the Rose. LSU, Michigan in the Sugar. If it's any time for Michigan, or LSU, Ohio State, correction, in the Sugar, and Michigan and Georgia in the Rose. If there's any time, though, LSU and Ohio State, that'd be such an interesting game to watch.
That'd
but
be great.
It'd be a shootout of a football game. And I feel like Ohio State would get LSU. I feel like they'd get them. I don't know. Maybe not, because LSU would be coming off of beating Bama and beating Georgia. I don't know.
To me, that pass rush would kill us.
Yeah. So LSU wins that one. So then you got Michigan, Georgia, to shed all the demons for the Wolverines, get past their hump. I don't think they do it. I don't. I just I don't know. I just don't see Jim Harbaugh as a coach that can win a national championship. I don't see any Big Ten coach as a coach that wins a national championship. Ryan Day, James Franklin, Harbaugh, any of them. I don't.
They can.
I think they can. I just think they don't.
I think Kirby Smart is just better than all of them. I mean, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, he's just Kirby Smart is a genius when it comes to football. And I mean, everyone heard that TCU pregame talk. I mean, there's just not many coaches that care about football as much as him, and there's not many coaches that connect with players just as much as him. And Kirby Smart, man, get ready for a dynasty, folks, because I mean, even if he doesn't win it this year, last year wasn't his last one.
Yeah.
I mean,
the
Georgia Bulldogs are gonna be here for a long, long time.
They're gonna be back. They're gonna be around for a while. Georgia is going to be, a team that's going to be competitive, and they're going to be solid for a while. And mine. So then that makes an LSU Georgia rematch in the national championship. And I think if you give Brian Kelly, and I think if you give Kirby Smart that time, a month time, and say who's going to be better prepared for a national championship game, I think it's Kirby Smart, and I think Georgia gets it back, and I think Georgia goes 3-peat. That's what I'm thinking. I'm going Georgia Bulldogs 3-peat. It's tough because I think there's about 10 teams. There's about 10 teams right now that I think can go get it. I do. I think
for sure.
I think there's about 10, maybe even 11 if you count some of those Pac-12 teams that could make things interesting down the stretch of the season. But only time will tell. I don't know. Only time will tell on here. But, now let's get into our final segment here of this podcast. We've been at it for a long time, and this is the final one of the day.
We are at 3 hours.
Yeah. So. It's been a minute, but we're wrapping it up now.
We started about 30 minutes into the Notre Dame game, and it has ended.
Yeah, and it was 42-3 final.
42-3 final?
Irish won. But we're going to go our preseason top 25. We're going to go top to bottom. We're going to start at 25 and go up. We're going to go, 25... Want to go 25, 30?
We're just go 5 each.
Okay, just go 5 each?
Yep.
Okay. So, my 25 to 21. At 25, I have Oklahoma. At 24, I have Kentucky. At 23, I have Clemson. At 22, I have Texas Tech. And at 21, I have North Carolina.
At 25, I have Texas Tech. 24, I have Oklahoma. At 23, I have Wisconsin. At 22, let's get fun. I got Auburn. And at 21, I got Oregon.
At 20, I have Ole Miss. 19, I have South Carolina. At 18, I have Texas A&M. 17, Wisconsin. And 16, TCU.
At 20, I have Miami. At 19, I have North Carolina. At 18, I have TCU. 17, I have Clemson. 16, I have South Carolina.
15, I've got Tennessee. 14, I've got Kansas State. 13, now this was before the Notre Dame game today, but I've got Notre Dame. 12, I've got Utah, and 11, I've got Washington.
At 15, sorry about that, I have Utah. At 14, I have Ole Miss. At 13, I have Kentucky. At 12, I have Oregon State. Go Beavers. And at 11, I have Kansas State.
So now for the top 10, and do you just want to go How do we want to do this? Just top 10 all the way through? Top 10?
We'll just keep going by fives.
Keep going by fives? Okay,
Yep.
perfect. So 10, we got the Oregon Ducks. 9, we got the Longhorns of Texas. 8, Florida State Seminoles. 7, Alabama Crimson Tide. And 6, Penn State Nittany Lions.
At 10, I have the Longhorns of Texas. At 9, the Huskies of Washington. 8, USC. 7, Louisiana State University. And 6, I have the Ohio State.
So my top 5. 5, I got USC. 4, I've got Ohio State. 3, I've got LSU. 2, I've got Georgia. And 1, I've got the Michigan Wolverines.
At 5, I have Penn State. 4, Alabama. 3, the Wolverines. 2, Florida State. And 1, Kirby Smart's led Georgia Bulldogs.
And there's our preseason top 25. Went through all the Power 5 today. Finally got it wrapped up. Talked about playoffs, preseason. We're going to be doing this all throughout, the college football season. We're gonna keep it up. We're gonna go week by week. We're gonna have something out next week where we're gonna do some of our predictions for some of the top games in week 1. We'll talk about some of those games as well as recap maybe some performances in week 0. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll see how it goes. But for Doc, this is Cade, and we're signing off. This will be it for the first podcast episode of Orbit Football.